She does not appear to be. Let's give her a... Can you guys call her office?
Is Senator Conrad here? We
She's
can do
not.
her.
You can probably call her office. I'm in the tower, so we'll take her. Arch shit.
Who's here?
We're just missing Arch.
Yeah, we can start with that.
Yeah, that's fine. We just have to introduce.
But I'm wondering if we could go to somebody.
No, we don't have anything for a while.
They're all hot.
What are we on, 31? 31.
Ooh, there's a bunch of
Say with MCAB, JCAB. How about 36? No. I may actually have broken a land speed record for fastest hamburger inhaled by human being. Who did?
Senator Hunt, you were up.
Did you say meat?
Great.
Great. No, she said meat.
Great.
We're going to do Senator Hunt's 31 on the agenda. It's Rule 3, Section 2B. Votes required to place a member on a committee. Senator Hunt, floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. I'm Megan Hunt, MEGANHUNT, and I represent District 8. This rule that regards votes required to place a member on a committee, this also codifies some of our long-held institutional norms around selecting caucus members. This rule would also provide that the 4 members representing each caucus and committee on committees would have the authority to assign their caucus members committees with 3 votes needed. So, in our caucuses, each caucus puts 4 people on committees. This just codifies that a majority of the members of the caucus can decide who goes on the committees. It also codifies our institutional norm that the committee shall consider seniority, incumbency, and personal preferences. As several of us spoke about on the floor earlier this week, this year's Committee on Committees process was the perfect example of why we need to enshrine some rules and expectations lest they be forgotten or ignored. I think it's fair that each caucus's Committee on Committee representatives have the authority to set assignments for their own caucus rather than allowing it to go to a vote of the entire committee, for example. And this will prevent the legislature from turning into kind of a free-for-all with deal-making and subversion of tradition and gamesmanship and giving favors to friends. And it also says that if any of us wants to keep our incumbent status on a committee that we're already sitting on, that codifies that in the rules as well. More norm codifying, basically.
Any questions? So, Senator Hunt, let me ask you, if, let's use, for example, the Education Committee.
Mhm.
We went from caucus 1 as the chairman to caucus 3, which then changed the number of people from caucus 2 that'll be on the committee from 3 to 2.
Mhm.
And one of the people who had been sitting on education lost their seat, not because we removed them, but because that district, that caucus district only had 2 seats instead of 3. How do you deal with that when you use those rules?
Well, as we talked about for over 8 hours on the floor, if we followed the norms, the person on the committee who had incumbency would have been given priority. And what the proposed rule change says, the wording is, the committee shall give consideration to seniority and personal preference in their considerations. No member may be removed from a committee they served upon in their immediate prior session without that member's permission. And so, talking about Senator Jen Day, she did give permission to be removed from that committee. She knew that was coming and she had kind of come to terms with it and said, okay, it's fine. I know that this is what's going to happen. So under this rule, it still would have given room for that situation to have ended up the way it did this time. If a senator is okay getting moved off a committee, it allows that to happen. It also says that members have to give consideration to seniority and personal preference. It doesn't say, must or that you have to do it. It just sort of codifies what is typically the norm, perhaps could avoid some arguments like we had this year about what the norm is.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to Senator Conrad, Rule 32, which is dealing with Rule 3, Section 2B, announcement of committee and committees meeting 2 hours in advance.
Yes, thank you so
Okay.
much, Senator Erdman. Danielle Conrad, DANIELLE, Conrad, CONRAD, representing North Lincoln's 46th Legislative District. I also brought a committee amendment to the committee for your consideration in regards to this proposal. Thank you. Our hardworking pages are still here late into the night with us. Appreciate that. But I really was working to try and get forward a placeholder in regards to some of the issues in process that we discovered in this year's committee assignment and selection and caucus processes. So I've worked with the clerk's office and my office to try and put a little bit more detail into that placeholder rule, and would suggest that you take a look at the proposed amendment to the proposed rule change that I brought forward thus far. I think, to echo some of Senator Hunt's comments, we have in our existing rules a requirement that if there is not a controlling rule on point, that we default to custom, precedent, and tradition. I think there was a great deal of disagreement about whether or not we were doing that in our caucus and committee assignment processes. Some of that might be part of the political nature of our work. Some of it might be a product of term limits. And it might be the simple fact that we don't have members serving as long who maybe are as deeply rooted in those customs, precedents, and traditions. I know when I entered the body, a lot of this actually wasn't particularly contentious the last go around. It was a more orderly process that set clear expectations for everybody involved and helped to diminish the rancor and helped us get a stronger start together as we ordered our business. So if we're going to lose some of that institutional knowledge in deference to the will of the voters in adopting term limits, perhaps we need to provide more detail in our rules to set order amid chaos and to provide clear expectations for all stakeholders. So I'd encourage you to take a look at the proposed rules amendment and then the amendment there too that I'm bringing to the committee today, which really just sets forward kind of more clarity about ensuring caucus meetings happen in the public, that there's an agenda provided, that the committee votes are recorded, how we take into account consideration and selection for those key members of key committees and then for committee assignments as well. And they're really just good governance things: transparency, clarity, notice, and opportunity to be heard. Those are really the nuts and bolts of good governance, and that's what's reflected in past practice and in the committee amendment before you. Thank you.
Any questions? Senator Conrad, in your proposed amendment you handed to
The
us.
amendment to the amendment, I guess, yes.
It goes on to say that the caucuses will be open
Mhm.
to the public and the press.
Mhm.
Okay. And
Just like our executive sessions are.
it makes significant changes to the rest of that. So that's quite a bit different than what you had submitted earlier. Was this the one that you wanted to bring in Monday and you said, I'll just bring it into the rules?
Yes, that's right, Senator. I was a little murky in terms of the process, and I know everybody was working quickly, but there was, I think, some wiggle room to bring in additional proposals on Monday. And instead of putting forward a new proposal, we just decided to bring it forward as a committee amendment.
Okay, I understand.
Thank
Any
you so
questions?
much.
I got one.
Yes, Senator Hanson.
Thank you, by the way,
Yes,
sorry.
good to see you. Hi.
And in your amendment,
Uh-huh.
in the third line,
Uh-huh.
each caucus should be called at the discretion of senior members.
Mm-hmm.
What is senior member almost kind of the seniority aspect again
Yes.
that we we're talking about before?
That's right. I think that's historically how it's been
And
called and
I don't
conducted.
know if do we have anything in statute that talks about seniority, or is it right now kind of subjective?
Well, I think it is a part of our internal policies as set by the executive board. For example, it's utilized for floor seating assignments and for committee seating assignments. I can't tell you off the top of my head, Senator Hanson, whether or not there's a definition therein. And if there's not a definition, of course, we default to its common usage, which I think is not particularly complicated or confusing in this regard.
Okay,
Any other questions?
thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Any proponents to rule change 31 or 32? Any opponents to those two rule changes? Are there neutral testifiers? Okay, hearing none, we shall move on. Senator Conrad, you are up next. Rules 33 on the agenda, 33 and 34. Rule 33 deals with Rule 5, Section 8, racial impact statement on each bill. And we'll do that one first.
Thank you so much, Senator Erdman, members of the committee. My name is Danielle Conrad, D-A-N-I-E-L-L-E, Conrad, C-O-N-R-A-D. I'm here today on behalf of North Lincoln's 46th Legislative District. Racial justice impact statements is an issue that's not new to legislating or new to Nebraska. There have been measures put before this body in recent years, both through the rule process and the planning committee and through substantive legislation. You may have seen that our colleague Senator McKinney has already reintroduced legislation on this topic this session. And I had a chance to touch base with him very briefly at the start of session to discuss a companion approach through our rules, because that's another opportunity that past legislatures have looked for in addressing these issues. So it will be no surprise for for returning members, and then something you'll quickly get up to speed on as new members. But typically each piece of legislation comes with a fiscal note. So we have a chance for local entities of government, state agencies, the fiscal analysts to weigh in and kind of calculate what the price tag is, the fiscal impact is for that particular legislative bill. And that's a key piece of information that helps to ensure we have a balanced budget and make decisions about the measures before us. Very, very similar to that approach when it comes with fiscal statements, fiscal notes is a best practice that's been adopted by 9 of our sister states, including our neighbors of Colorado and Iowa. And Iowa's had this on the books for some time in regards to legislation, I believe, surrounding educational policy and criminal justice policy, where they also prepare a racial justice impact statement so that policymakers also have quickly available and readily available, credible, nonpartisan information to understand if there is a significant disparate racial impact in the legislation that is before us. Why is this important? Not only in terms of best practice, but it's also important because some of the systems and the big questions that we're asked to take up continue to have significant racial disparities in Nebraska, and sometimes more pronounced than many of our sister states. So in recognizing that we each have an obligation, as Senator Arch said during his speaker's race, to pursue justice, we each need to fully make ourselves aware of how some of these systems and circumstances in history are impacting the decisions that we make and how we move forward together. So take, for example, the fact that in Nebraska, Black students are suspended and expelled from school 6 times more than white students. Keep in mind that a Black Nebraskan is 4.65 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than his white neighbor. Keep in mind, in my home in Lancaster County, only about 4.5% of our population in Lancaster County identify as Black, but over 30% in our county jail are Black. These are just a few examples of some of the systemic disparities that we all have a responsibility to address. So rather whether it's through rule or through legislation, there are proven, common sense, nonpartisan, credible tools to help us get better policy, to address these issues in a thoughtful manner, to ensure that we're all educated about the racial disparities that exist so that we can confront them clear-eyed and head-on and move forward together. It's not an indictment of any one person, but it's a fact, and we need to figure out how we can include these key considerations officially in our policy making. In years past, people, I believe it was some policy experts at Creighton University, have even offered to conduct and provide these for the legislature at little to no cost. We have resources available in Nebraska with our institutions of higher learning and through legislative staff to get those additional pieces of information to make sure that we're making the best decision that we can that centers racial justice on key decisions. So that's a little bit of background on the measure, and I'd urge your adoption.
Any questions? I guess I have one.
Sure.
So we get the racial impact statement
Mhm.
back. And it is disproportionate to a certain
Mhm.
group.
Mhm.
So then do we have different laws for each group? We have different laws for white people and brown people and black people. Do we do that? What do we do with this racial impact statement? And
Sure.
And
Great
then-
question.
I'll ask you something else after you answer.
Sure.
that one.
You know, Senator, I think that what a racial justice impact statement does is, again, it operates in a manner very similar to a fiscal note. A fiscal note doesn't provide an automatic veto to a piece of legislation. It's just one piece of information that we utilize to say, is this a good investment? How does this compare to other investments that we're making? So as a companion piece, you could say, boy, if we move forward with this measure, it might show a disparate impact, or it might not. And that might be one thing, one additional helpful piece of information when deciding to vote yay or nay or make appropriate amendments or reform as the measure makes its way through the process.
So then we would make a decision based on, it's got an adverse effect on this group. So we change the law to make it, less invasive for those? I'm not sure why we use a racial
Sure.
impact statement.
Sure, we would utilize it. I would hope that senators would utilize the information as one consideration amongst many when deciding how to cast their vote. And if we did identify through a racial justice statement that there was a significant disparity, a disparate impact that could be corrected, we should look at alternatives to try and ensure that we could correct that, because I know that we all care about ensuring equity and equality in the application of our laws and the enforcement of our laws.
So the next question I have is,
Mhm.
so if there's a disproportionate share of one group in jail over another, would you agree that they're there because they broke the law?
Yes, and Senator, I would also agree that if you look at the data and the information, say, for example, when it comes to the use of illicit drugs, that the use of illicit drugs happens across demographics, racial, socioeconomic, et cetera, generally very similar rates. So knowing, for example, in that scenario where we have people breaking the law at the same percentage across different demographics, why we have the disparity in arrest and incarceration is something important for us to figure out together and to address and think through together. Now, it may not move your heart and your mind when deciding how to cast your vote, but I do think it is an important piece of information that may be of value to senators in this body, as it is to our colleagues in 9 other states that have this information available.
Wouldn't it make more sense to try to figure out why one group breaks the law more than the other?
Senator, again, I think if you look at the data and research, for example, that I just talked about, that conclusion or that statement actually wouldn't be accurate. When you find, for example, that one group isn't breaking the law more than another group, but one group is being arrested and incarcerated at a higher percentage. So that's really, I think, the difference there.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none? Okay,
Thank you so much.
stay there. Number 34 is up next.
Okay.
You are 34 as well.
I would also be, just because it addresses a very, very similar kind of proposal in regards to different aspects of the rule, I would be happy to stand on my intro for both in regards to racial justice statements. And I know that there's other testifiers that are coming today. Perhaps if I don't bore you with an additional opening, you might afford me the privilege to close again. But
So
we
then,
can revisit that together, Senator.
right, so then your second rule, 34, has to deal with juveniles, I believe. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But I think that's very similar
Right.
in terms of proposals.
All right, thank you. Okay, any proponents? Thank you for sticking around.
Thank you for sticking around. I don't, can I have one? I'll fill it out. I don't have one for this one.
You can fill that out later.
My name is Angie Phillips, Angie Phillips. I am one of the co-founders of the Nebraska Legislative Study Group. And I'm actually here today. I think that I know for sure there's going to be some good testimony after me. And I believe that Senator Conrad gives some good testimony. The only thing I really want to point out is that when it comes to the people of Nebraska, membership we have throughout the state, this is very important legislation for them, or a rule for them, because they do want to make sure, especially whereas we don't have the diversity in our state legislature that we have in our state, that we are taking into perspective the impact that this has on different races, especially when some of them might not be a part of the conversation on the floor. So, and then I also wanted to bring up that previously when this had been introduced, I believe it was Senator Vargas that had proposed this rule change once before, that interest was there as well. And if you were to go back and look on the record, you would see that there was a considerable amount of emails and testimony sent in for that. And that was on a rules committee that's kind of more normal, where not very many people are showing up and there's maybe only like 25 rules or whatever it was. So that's really all I had to add tonight.
Thank you. Any questions? Not seeing none, thank you. Next proponent. Thank you for sticking around as well.
No problem. Thank you, Chair Erdman and other members of the Rules Committee. My name is Kimara Snipes, and that is KIMARA SNIPES. And I'm Director of Equity and Community Partnerships for the Nebraska Civic Engagement Table, where we invite and encourage people from all communities to have a seat where they can participate in the decision-making processes that happen every day that affect their lives. I serve as our head of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and know firsthand how important it is to apply an equitable lens to our legislative processes. I want to thank Senator Conrad for proposing this rules change that promotes a legislative process that ensures that our most vulnerable communities are not left behind. We at the Nebraska Table understand that the proposed change would help legislators center fairness in their policymaking by having access to additional information regarding legislative impacts on the Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. Legislation has historically impacted and harmed racial minority communities differently than white communities, especially through the criminal and juvenile justice systems. It is well established that interaction with the criminal and juvenile justice systems disproportionately harms people of color. One way this disparate impact shows up is through eligibility and ability to participate in civic life. For example, Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color comprise 22% of the state population, yet make up only 8% of the voting population. System involvement creates barriers to civic engagement and democratic participation, including through legislation that overtly strips people of their voting rights. As an organization supporting our communities and growing their civic engagement programs, we believe in eliminating any barriers that lead to underrepresentation at the voting booth, in elected office, and at other levels of power where decisions are made. When Black, Brown, and Indigenous people are disproportionately impacted by the criminal and juvenile justice system, so is their ability to vote and otherwise exercise their right to civic participation in democratic processes. In order to adequately address any existing gaps or disparities, it is absolutely necessary to be intentional and look at policy through a race lens. As Nebraskans, we believe deeply in fairness for all people. By making the effort to study the impact of proposed legislation on
The red light is on.
communities of color, policymakers have an opportunity to advance fairness and reduce harm. For these reasons, we ask for you to adopt this rule. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Moore. Hang on, quick question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Snipes, are there circumstances in which policymakers may not be aware of the impact that their legislation has on communities of color?
Absolutely. I would say especially in a state like Nebraska. Of course, I live in Omaha, which has large amounts of even just segregation, correct? And we're limited to the communities that we are exposed to. So I would say absolutely.
And how might a racial impact statement tease out that sort of impact?
I know often we talk about an equity lens. For us at the table, we like to take it a little bit deeper than that. I'm sorry, it's hot in here, so I'm taking off my glasses. We actually prefer to really talk about being equity LASIK because like my glasses that I just took off, you can't take equity off and on like I did these glasses. This is something that needs to be, like we talk about equity LASIK, permanent and all of the time. And so when we talk about being equity LASIK, it means asking questions, in this particular case about policy, to make sure that we're making the right choices. If we do research and pay attention, we see that people are affected at a disproportionate rate. And so having these statements is a way to ask the questions ahead of time to, again, make sure that we're making the right decisions.
Would we have the ability then as lawmakers, sort of armed with these racial impact statements, to change the impact or to modify the impact? Or, how would we use those? What would be the pragmatic aspect of how we would use them?
As someone who has been a policymaker herself, I think you use it as an opportunity to get with your constituents and have conversations. I don't think that you might make a vote by yourself, but essentially you're not making a decision by yourself. In my opinion, you should be talking to the people and you have these conversations and you get the information that you need. It's unfair to think that you, Senator DeBoer, can come up with all the answers alone. So in my opinion, you as legislators, you talk to us as your constituents and the people who deserve to have a seat at the table.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next testifier, proponent. Go ahead.
Good evening, Chairman Erdman and members of the Rules Committee. My name is Joey Adler-Ruane, JoeyAdler-Ruane, and I'm the Policy Director at Open Sky Policy Institute, here to testify in support of the proposed change to Rule 5, Section 8, because we believe racial impact statements would provide crucial data regarding the populations affected by proposed legislation and are thus an important part of evidence-based policymaking. This is especially true with regard to fiscal policy, as the way the state and local governments raise and spend revenue has major implications for racial and ethnic equity. Historically, policies in this area have too often increased racial disparities in power, income, and wealth. Racial impact statements would help ensure proposed policies provide equal opportunity for all people, which in turn would help promote economic prosperity throughout the state. Several policy areas in particular would benefit from disaggregated data. Changes in the tax code, especially those that impact income groups differently, can significantly impact ethnic and racial disparities. This is the case in the inheritance tax and the earned income tax credit, as both have an outsized effect on the particular racial or ethnic groups. As with raising money, how we spend money also has impacts by race and ethnicity. Other states have found that communities of color are more likely to be uninsured, live in counties with less access to high-quality clinical care, attend school in aging buildings, and are less likely to own a car. And it's important to understand how Nebraska's investments in these areas are impacting various communities. As 9 other states, including a few neighbors, have concluded, this disaggregation of data enables better transparency and allows for evidence-based solutions to the socioeconomic problems our society faces. With the increasing availability of disaggregated data, the policy process will be improved when senators are able to evaluate the racial impact of proposed legislation. We urge the committee to advance this proposed rule change, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Erdman and members of the committee. My name is Spike Eichel, and if it's okay, I'd like to testify for 2 of my clients, if I could. I'm sure you'd accommodate. I'm here for the ACLU of Nebraska and for Voices for Children in support of the proposed rule change from Senator Conrad. We want to thank her for introducing it. I think the committee has an idea, at least what this concept is, and that is it would suggest to modify the rules to prepare racial impact statements for certain pieces of legislation. Senator Conrad already explained that we can see a clear disparate impact based on race in our criminal justice system, our juvenile justice system, and our child welfare system. I'm being handed out a minority impact statement from Iowa. That's what Iowa calls their racial justice or racial impact statement. They call it a minority impact statement. And what Senator Conrad explained is similar to what Iowa does. The first 2 pages that you have in the handout is what Iowa calls a fiscal note. And the second 2 pages after the first 2 pages, the 2 pages that are not numbered, is the reference minority impact statement. And I just got online this morning early and just printed this off. And this is just a bill that the Iowa legislature considered relating to obscene materials and whether this crime would have any kind of disparate impact based on race. The conclusion was it would not. So the legislature at least considered that. And I can give an example if somebody asks a question, but to answer Senator Erdman's very good questions, the idea is not necessarily to shame or call people who propose certain bills that might have a racial disparate impact racist. That's not productive, because you are right. We don't have laws that say the following law applies to Black people only, or the following laws apply to white people only. It's more systemic than that. There can be situations where something at first glance may not necessarily appear to have a racially disparate impact, but in practice it does. And we saw that in the federal system. President Trump did address that in 2018 with his First Step Act. It was done also in 2010 by the Congress that dealt with the prosecution of people who had cocaine versus crack cocaine. The federal system said that it was against the law for you to possess or sell cocaine. If I could finish.
Make it quick.
Okay, it's against the law for anyone to have cocaine. And they said how much cocaine you have depends on how much punishment you have. So people are breaking the law equally. But people who had crack cocaine had things that weighed a lot more, because the way that the federal system defined what cocaine was, it was cocaine and any substance that had detectable cocaine in it.
Okay.
So if somebody has a lot of money, they can buy some nice cocaine. They don't have that much raw weight. They're not going to do that much time. And that's the disparity that was addressed. And that's a neutral thing that has a disparate impact that perhaps something like this could capture at the front.
So this isn't your first rodeo?
No.
So can you spell your name?
Oh, sorry, Spike Eichel, E-I-C-K. First name S-B-I-K-E, last name E-I-C-K-H-O-L-T.
Thank you. Anyone else? Proponents?
Howdy, y'all.
Good.
My name is Andrew Farias. That's ANDREWFARIAS, and I'm here testifying as the Policy Fellow with the Asian Community and Cultural Center here in Lincoln. And I'm speaking in support of this proposed rule change to require racial impact statements for each bill. So if y'all aren't familiar, the Asian Community and Cultural Center supports and empowers all refugees and immigrants through programs and services, and advances the sharing of Asian culture and other cultural heritages of our clients within the community at large. For over 30 years, our organization has served the Lincoln area by increasing the stability of immigrant and refugee Nebraskans who face economic and cultural barriers to self-sufficiency as new Americans. In 2021, we served 1,658 clients from over 32 nationalities. This includes people who have escaped persecution from their home countries. They've lost family members to genocide. These are folks who have sought better lives for themselves and their families because they have heard from other community members about how great it is to live in Nebraska. They tell their relatives and their loved ones about the good life that we have here in our state. We have staff members who work with clients to make sure they are aware of how to adapt to living in Nebraska. This can include everything from how to take the bus to how to apply for housing to how to interact with law enforcement. So given that the proposed rule requires a statement of the adverse racial impacts and also asks for evidence of consulting with representatives from impacted communities, I want to say that our organization is one of those connections. When these bills are being introduced that can have a potential impact on underrepresented people based on color, race, or national origin, we want to make sure that our elected officials know too. For example, we have community leaders with lived experiences who know how a bill that limits translation or interpretation services could harm a specific ethnic group that has higher rates of illiteracy, such as the Karen, an ethnic group subject to persecution and ethnic cleansing by the Burmese government. There are approximately 5,500 Karen living in Nebraska, with an additional 300 refugees from other ethnic groups in Burma. I ask that you support the proposed rule change to require racial impact statements for each bill. Let's make it feel like home by doing research on adverse racial impact statements that could pose problems to our most vulnerable populations.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Any other proponents? Okay, anybody in opposition?
Hello, senators, and good evening. My name is Penny Stevens, Stephen's, and I oppose both 33 and 34. There are more ways in our country of people being oppressed than just by the color of their skin. I believe this is discriminatory, and my heart goes out to all people who are oppressed and struggling and having a very difficult time. Thomas Jefferson, back in 1776, our Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator. We know this. We understand people are equal. I believe that this rule would really put a damper on other people, not just because the color of their skin. I hope I make sense there. So I oppose it, and I think education for all people to help them earn and find their way is the way to go about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you. Any other opponents?
Jeannie Greisen, Jeannegreisen. And I'm here to oppose this for reasons that we've already stated in this hearing about we are already filled with so many bills, we can't get through them. There's too many. We can't focus on what we're already doing. And then in addition, this language is very dangerous language that we've already seen at the university system. We've seen it in the public education system, the equity, diversity, all of these kinds of language is being used with critical race theory, is really on the verge of Marxism. And the last place that we need that is to come into this legislature. So it's only going to make this process much worse. The thing that we need to focus on is the government. We need less government, not more government. That is how people are actually free. They're free to do what they want without the government intervening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Are there other opponents? Now's a good time. State your name and spell it and continue.
Connie Reinke, Connie Reinke. I again will echo the last speaker, and I would just say we do want equality and to have to protect citizens of the United States, but what this intends to do, I believe, separates instead of protecting individual rights, as we say in the Constitution. We've just seen critical race theory, which basically is what we're talking about here, across other countries, where the fist and that symbol has actually divided and is destructive for those countries. And so I don't think it should be in the legislature. I think we need to protect individual rights, everyone's individual rights. So thank you.
Any questions? I'm seeing none. Thank you. Any other opponents?
Calvin Pemberton, CalvinPemberton, and I am opposed to these rule changes. Coming from Denver, Colorado, in a very minority-filled community, I can see how they feel like there's a disproportional incarceration rate, but I don't believe that. I believe people that make bad choices should be punished for those bad choices. And to assume that this legislative body would be so, I know I don't want to mean it this offensive, but would be too ignorant to see a bill that would be racially impactful and still vote for it. That's an insult to you guys, and I don't believe that you would do that intentionally in any way. I've gone through about 200 of the bills that are going to be voted on, or at least looked at this session. And out of all of those, I personally, I'm not, a professional, but I didn't see any of those that would have a racial impact that would justify an extra step in the process to slow down and further bog down the system that you guys are already challenged with. So I am opposed to this.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Any other opponents? How about neutral? Okay. You neutral, ma'am?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks for hanging around.
My name's Judy King, Judyking, and I've been listening, watching on TV, all of these speakers over here, and I'm an activist, and I know that there's a lot of racist, fascist Republicans out in the rest of the state, and I've been dealing with them, so I know that there's a need for you to learn what the purpose of Senator Conrad's issue was. You need to understand why there are different people, and I'm sorry, but I'm just so upset at these people. I mean, they're a joke. They are a joke. They're racist, fascist. They don't want to learn anything new, and neither do you, apparently. And CRT, or whatever that is, they don't understand it, and they never will if they don't stop this stuff. They're not patriots. They're just wackadoodles. And I'm sorry, I'm just fed up with them. I have to deal with them all the time when I go into hearings, and when I go to other school board meetings, they're just nuts. And I'm nuts on the other side, so. And just a second here. There is racism, and they're not patriots. Anyway, that's all I have to say. But you need to listen to Senator Conrad, because you need the help, and so do these people. Nuts. Sorry.
Okay, any other neutrals? Any other neutrals? Hearing none, we'll move on to Rule 35, and that is Senator Hunt. And it's Rule 2, Section 3I, and it deals with pets allowed in the offices. Senator Hunt, welcome back.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for your stamina this evening, and thank you again to all of our friends in Nebraska who've been here tonight and been able to stick around. This is the best rule introduced this year. So what this rule says is that senators may allow animal companions to be kept in their offices. Policies regarding pets are at the discretion of each individual senator for their office. This rule change would just allow senators or staff to have a pet in the building. Some people were suggesting to me, like, maybe this could be abused, and I don't think that that's actually likely to happen. Maybe I have a little too much faith in people, but I don't think people would bring naughty or problematic pets because they're too much of a pain to take care of. It would be like voluntarily bringing a toddler with you to work every day. Like, it's not really ideal for the work that we do here. But I have to tell you all, my office has far and away gotten the most supportive calls and emails in support of this rule change from people who watch the legislature and from a lot of staff. I can think of many times in the last 4 years that I've been here where somebody had a dog in their office and it was behaving, or one staffer was fostering some kittens and he brought in all the kittens one day, and it was kind of fun for a couple days for everyone to come and hold a kitten once in a while. And I think if there was any kind of damage or people should be liable for that, and folks should be able to complain about noise or something if that's a problem, and they can lose the privilege. But and it's also possible that most senators, in creating their own policy, would say no pets in the office. But There's probably a few who would say, with my permission, you can bring your dog into the office, and if she lays down and she's good, then that's going to make everybody's day a little bit better. So the key is it's staying in your office and being responsible for any damage and being able to lose the privilege if there's any complaints or anything like that. But given that the rules are silent on this topic, I think it would be a good thing to clarify. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Senator Hanson.
I've met Senator Hunt's dog. Is it a bulldog? I forget what.
Thank you so much for asking. Cricket. Miss Cricket is a French Bulldog Pomeranian mix, and she is a rescue, and she's a blessing to everybody.
I get to pet her dog.
Yes.
Walking out the Capitol. Because I have, my dog goes to my office with me to work too. And I made the mistake of letting my daughter name it and then putting it on Facebook to see if people liked it. So it's just the weirdest name ever. But just actually.
Okay, what's the name? You can't say that.
Miss Winifred Coco.
Winifred Coco. I love her.
So we call her Winnie. But more kind of like, I don't know how it works if you look into it, because I think the building is a historical building. There's some federal rules, I think, with that, or it's the state rules that in order to still be classified as a historical building, or I don't know. Because I know they have to meet certain qualifications, and were animals being in there, does that affect it? I just don't know.
That's a good question. Since we worked with the clerk's office to draft all these rules, I feel like it's probably kosher. It's probably okay. But if that is a problem, obviously I would withdraw this rule and have it not apply. But yeah, I think if the policy is up to each individual senator, the animal has to stay in the office. Plus, just given the reality and the realistic, context, which is this probably isn't going to happen a lot or be like a big issue. Honestly, it's just sort of saying it's not going to be a big deal if it does happen sometimes.
Make one other question I just thought of. So, heaven forbid, someone brings their dog and it's actually biting somebody. Who'd be liable for that then?
Wouldn't the owner be liable? I don't know why the law would be different in the capital than it is
Just didn't know
anywhere
if
in
that
the
needs
world.
clarification, or I don't know. Maybe not. I just didn't know for sure how that works. Since we're employees of the Capitol,
It's a
then
good question.
I mean, I don't know.
I think that the handler of the animal would be liable
I would think
because
so.
I don't think the law changes when you're just in here.
In case somebody sues, I should know. So. Cool.
Any other questions? Okay, while you're there, let's go to Rule 36, deals with Rule 2, Section 12, adding a new section, and the new section pertains to doors of the office remaining open when staff are present.
So this rule says that when you have a staffer in the office, you have to keep the door open. And I really just drafted this rule to be a pest regarding the debate that we're going to have about the secret ballots. Whether that comes out in the regular rules package that we debate on the floor, or if it becomes an amendment, or, we know that that's probably one of the most controversial rules proposals that we're going to be debating is Senator Halloran's secret ballot thing. And so I introduced this rule to make a point about transparency and accessibility to constituents. Just that where would it end? I mean, should we have NET put a camera in every office so constituents can always see what we're doing since they elected us and we're accountable to them? We could take this pretty far, but I drafted a rule to say you have to leave your door open when a staffer is present.
Any questions? Do you currently do that?
Well, I'm up in the tower. When we were downstairs, I was in a bowling alley. So when I wasn't in the office, we usually left it open. And when I was in the office, we usually closed it just because the way the office is designed with the room, if I'm in the office, my desk faces directly out the door. So there just really wasn't even privacy to have a phone call or work on anything.
So if we adopt this rule, you wouldn't have been able to do that?
That's correct. Well, I could keep the outside door open, but maybe not my office door or something like that.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now Rule 37. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh deals with Rule 2, Section 3I, firearms in the legislature. Senator Cavanaugh, please join us.
Good morning, evening.
Chairman and members of the Rules Committee. My name is Michaela Kavanaugh, Machaeala-Cavanagh. Really wish I had a shorter name right now. So my rule change is to prohibit the possession of firearms and other lethal weapons by any member or any individual within legislative space in the state capitol building, and prohibit, with the following exceptions, law enforcement and Capitol Security. Thank you so much to our law enforcement and Capitol Security for being here with us this evening and all of the time. Individuals with the approval of the Nebraska Capitol Commission participating in historical reenactments, honor guards, and ceremonial proceedings. I will be 100% honest. I didn't know those things happened in this building, but my staff wanted that exemption in there, so I have to assume that we have some historical reenactments. And members of the armed services of the United States, active or reserve National Guard, or state or reserved officers training corps when on duty. Again, thank you to all of our law enforcement and our military personnel for your service to the state and to the country. So this rule comes from a couple of years ago. We had several hundred people in the building to testify for and against various legislation around weapons and guns, specifically guns and gun legislation. And people were in the committee hearing room with weapons very openly right behind like where I am sitting right now. And it was nothing short of terrifying for myself and for others. And I did not expect it. I did not know that that was even a thing that was allowed in the building until it happened. And I spent a lot of time since then talking to a lot of people, our former speaker Hilgers, also when he was the chair of the executive board, and former Senator Dan Hughes when he was the chair of the executive board, trying to figure out how this could be addressed. So currently, you cannot have concealed weapons, if you have a concealed carry license, you cannot have a concealed carry gun in the Capitol. It is prohibited by law because we have our state troopers office in the building, and we also have the Supreme Court office in the building. So you can have open carry, but you cannot have concealed carry. So we already have restrictions in this building on what type of weapons can be here and circumstances around that. And my intention is not to take away anyone's rights to have any law-abiding citizen's rights to have a gun. Absolutely not. No way, no how. Not the intention here. The intention is to have safety in our proceedings. When we had the hundreds of people here for the day that we had the gun testimony, they actually closed the gallery because it was not safe to have a lot of people with a lot of feelings about what was going on up in the gallery with loaded guns, with all of us down in the chamber floor. That was not the case this last time when we had the guns. There were significantly fewer people in the building the last time we had gun legislation heard, and it was much less of an event. It was much quieter that day. I did talk to our state troopers about the safety and security, and they said that they couldn't close the gallery. I'm not sure what the difference was from time to time, but they also said the only way we can stop people from bringing guns into your legislative spaces is for you to pass a rule, and then we will enforce your rule. So until the legislature has a rule, security cannot enforce a non-existent rule. So that is the intention, to just have the same rule for all weapons as we have for concealed carry and as we have for signs.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
And I
Okay.
would like to stay to close.
Pardon me?
I would like to stay to close.
We're not doing closings.
We were doing closings at the start.
Yeah, the time is getting away from us. We're going to be here till 10, 11 o'clock.
Okay, I will just close on this on my next rule then.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Those in support of any one of those three or all three, please come forward.
My name is Melody Vaccaro, Melody Vaccaro. I represent Nebraskans Against Gun Violence, and we're here to support Senator Kavanaugh's firearm rule proposal. I was at the hearing that she referenced a few years back, and the bills on the table that we were there to discuss were about protecting people, primarily women, from domestic violence. And there was a bill about adding some training and a brochure to the concealed carry class about suicide prevention. And there was a bill to repeal the Lie to Women abortion bill. And those are the bills that hundreds of people came to commandeer the committee about. And there were, they were carrying assault weapons, and one of the people was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and identified with the Bugaloo movement, which is one of the groups that has been identified as a very serious security threat. I also want to just bring up nationally what we're seeing is we're seeing in 2016, there were about 902 threats on members of Congress. In 2021, that was almost 10,000. Threats towards policymakers are increasing all around the country, in state bodies, in federal bodies, in municipal bodies. As we expect all kinds of contentious bills to be debated in the body, guns incite violence, guns bring up the heat. When topics are already hot, that can really lead to some serious deaths. When there is a mass shooting, I also want to bring up the threat to first responders. Not only does it put them in the direct danger in the moment, there are also high suicide rates after those events when they see those kinds of massacres. After the January 6th insurrection, where a police officer was killed and one of the protesters died, we saw 4 Metro Police Department officers that did end their lives after that event, after serving the community in that way.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Hearing none, thank you. Any other proponents? Your time is starting now.
I'm Judy King, Judy King. I was also at that hearing that day, and speaking of white supremacists, I was reading an article out of the paper out of the Omaha paper about a white supremacist, and he was testifying in that hearing, and my time got shut off because Salama didn't like what I was reading about the white supremacist. They shouldn't have had any guns there. They're threatening everybody. They shouldn't have had any guns in there. It shouldn't be allowed, period. If you want, I mean, because we can bring guns. If you want the crazy other side to bring guns, we can do that too. So you might want to stop that crap now. I got to mention the Constitution because that's what they always say, a Constitution and patriot. What else do you say? Let's see, CRT, your knowledge of CRT is crap. And I think we've had enough of your idiotic ideas on gun legislation. Our kids are getting killed because of your lack of good gun legislation. There was plenty of police officers with guns at Uvalde. They were too afraid to go in and save those children. The police knew what that gun would do to them. You do nothing but produce stupid bills where gun owners need no training, WTF. More brazen gun owners out there carrying guns with no training, that's just brilliant. We're getting sick and tired of your stupidity and your negligence and are at the point of melting all your guns. You need to do something about these stupid bills
Ms.
because.
King, your light is red.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Next testifier. State your name and spell it, please.
Hello, my name is Angie Phillips. It's ANGIE PHILIPS. I'm here in support of Senator Kavanaugh's bill. So I actually want to give a little bit of personal background. I've been affected by gun violence, and this was actually in the I'm originally from Western Nebraska. Most of my family lives in North Platte. I was from the Grant Madrid area. And growing up, I had two uncles that were shot, leaving one of them paralyzed from the neck down. And the other one had 3 gunshot wounds, but no like real permanent damage. When something like this happens, it really traumatizes a family. It changed our entire lives. My mother, I was 14 at the time. My brother was 16. My mom had to go initially be with my uncle in Kearney while he was in intensive care and then finish up rehabilitation in Craig. It changed our whole lives. I have a right to be here and to testify and to feel safe in doing that. And when there are people with guns that I can visibly see, there's a sense of intimidation, and it's just not really necessary for this environment. I'm fine if they want to do whatever they want to do with their guns, as long as it's not hurting anyone outside of here. But this should be a safe space where the public feels safe to come and share our experiences with you and not have to worry about confronting traumas from our childhoods or from our past.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none. Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Please state your name and spell it if you would.
Hi again, Meg Mikolajczyk, MEG-MIKOLAJCZYK. And you can sing it to the Mickey Mouse song if you want to learn it. So I'm here in my personal capacity, and I debated whether or not I wanted to say anything. I am a gun owner. I'm not about to debate the Second Amendment. But the day that we had the abortion gun hearing here a few years ago, was like the scariest, worst day of my professional career up here. My daughter still talks about that day because I came to her daycare still crying because I did not know what could happen. We know that these hearings can be really charged. Now put abortion and guns in a room together, and then actual guns in the room. And some I think were loaded, I don't know. But that's putting a lot of trust in a lot of people on a really, really charged issue in a really, really small room without much exits. And we see every day that those things happen. I have this memory, maybe I've made it up at this point, but I have this memory of a testifier with a gun on the table pointing at the senators, and I don't want anything bad to happen to any of us. And so that day was the worst day of my professional career. So I just want to share that, please, please, I want to go pick my kids up. I want you all to get to do the same. And we can be a little bit more reasonable maybe in this building. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in support? Anyone in opposition?
Calvin Pemberton, CALVIN PEMBERTON. As many of you have obviously noticed, I have open carry today. Okay, that's my Second Amendment right. But who also probably noticed would be our officers presiding over us, right? I'm sure they noticed. I'm sure they're paying extra special attention, and I trust that they would do what would be needed to be done if there was a situation that was abused for, a nefarious purpose. I personally have had concealed carry classes and many, many hours of field training, okay? So I know I needed to carry open, but I don't have to. There are studies that have been conducted that show that in a room where nefarious plans were possibly going to happen, people that are carrying openly has maybe faltered or stopped some of those from actually coming true. Now, weekly right now, with the chaos across the country, we're seeing at least once a week somebody that's either stopped a home invasion, stopped somebody that's being beat on the street, business owners that have protected their businesses. So what's to say that, you have a citizen in here that might actually protect you at one point also? I mean, so you can look at this both ways. I know some people maybe were scared and they can find their little safe space eventually. That's fine. Go to their therapy, but maybe one day somebody that's carrying could actually protect them too. So I would like to see you guys continue the open carry policy. I don't agree with the concealed carry in here. I think you should be open about what you're carrying.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone else in opposition?
Jeannie Greisen, JeanneGreisen. I just want to go on the record being a proponent for the Second Amendment.
Okay, thank you. Next testifier? Opposition?
Connie Reinke, ConnieReinke. I don't like what's going on in the world. It seems it's becoming more and more chaotic, and there's more violence. And I believe that's the very reason why we should have this this proposal. I'm sorry, that it should remain as it is. Again, I don't like that we have to live in a world that there are these people that do open fire and go into communities and do these types of things. But I think the only protection we have is to be able to have a weapon and be able to carry that, and that should remain the way it is. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Next testifier. Welcome back.
Steve Jessen, StevenJessen. So our Second Amendment, I don't know if I need to tell you, but it's a well-regulated militia being necessary to secure to the security of the free states. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And all I have to say in regards to that is, as senators, you took a sworn oath to uphold this Constitution of the United States. And by doing these things, you are infringing on the Second Amendment. Go ahead.
Senator Work.
Hi, sir.
Hi,
You and I have worked together on some things in the past.
we have,
We get along?
we do.
Yeah. Would you like me to make decisions in this body because I became afraid for the life of myself or my family? Would you like me to make my decisions because somebody had guns in a room and was saying, I better make that decision because they have guns? I don't think.
No, I agree with you there. That's not, nope.
So if we have guns in a room, if everyone around me has a gun and I don't have a gun, do I have more power or do they have more power?
Shouldn't be either way. Why would it be give somebody with a gun more power?
Well, I mean, they have the ability to do something to me that I wouldn't have back. I mean, they have the ability. They probably wouldn't, but they have the ability.
Well, people have the ability to do whatever, Senator.
Yeah.
And so my whole point is because it's a gun doesn't make it any different than if it was a knife or a baseball bat
Sure,
or any of those
absolutely
other
right.
things. So we would have to eliminate anything that could be used as a weapon. Matter of fact, statistically or whatever, more people are killed with hammers than they are with guns.
If you came in here with a hammer, I'd probably have a problem if you're
Right,
standing
and
here.
that's my point.
You
So
would
we
have him
can't
standing here with a
ban
hammer, too.
everything that could kill someone.
I do think, though, that when Senator Kavanaugh introduced this proposal, what she's thinking about is we don't want to live in a country where people are making decisions as lawmakers based on whether or not they have a gun put to their head. That's probably what she was thinking.
Well, has that ever happened in here where somebody has put a gun to your head? I would
I mean-
ask you that, really.
I
We're
mean,
making rules
I
for
certainly
something
was-
that hasn't happened.
I certainly was sitting in range of a gun in that hearing many times. So I don't know. I don't
I
want to
understand.
cause a fight. I
No,
think-
you're not.
I
I'm
think
not.
there's just some nuance to this that is maybe not being recognized.
Yeah. And my position or my answer to your question in regards to this would be simply this. The reason is because it is an issue because of people assume everything because of a person that carries a gun,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what you,
If somebody had-
someone that would be intimidated by a gun has, I guess, whatever, they maybe had a bad experience or whatever. I can understand that. That's for sure. But that doesn't give them the right to take away my rights as a
Yeah.
citizen of the United States. And the fact
I
of the
get that.
matter is we still have the right. Now, if we have 500,000 killings every year from guns, I would say,
I
we
get that.
definitely need to address that, but we need to address it constitutionally, not by just making laws.
I have no intention of doing any of that.
Okay.
I probably wouldn't want you to come up here with a hammer or a baseball bat or a knife or any of those things. You're standing there with a baseball bat or a hammer or a knife or a crossbow or a scimitar or any other thing like that, halberd, I could go on and on.
Right.
I would probably have a problem with any of those things. So I think maybe that's the rule she's trying to get at. Is
Right.
making sure that there's not undue influence by use of weapons in a room.
And I understand that, and I appreciate that.
Thanks
But
for talking with me. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Nope, that's
I just
okay.
know you and I know each other.
I know.
All right, thank
I'm
you.
good.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Any other opponents? Anyone in the neutral capacity?
Hello again, committee members. I'm here to testify as a private citizen, just in the neutral capacity.
State your name.
My name is Cassandra
Spell it.
Griffin, CASSA and DRA, GRIFFIN. I just wanted to clarify some things from a statistical standpoint. This is from the wonderful Statistica analysis on the level of murder victims in the United States in 2021 by weapons used that I thought would be an important clarification based on what we've heard today so far. Handguns, over 6,000 people were murdered by handguns in the United States. Firearms, type not stated, that's 4,740. Knives or cutting instruments, that's 1,035. Personal weapons, hands, feet, etc., that's 461. Rifles, that's 447. Other guns, 277. Blunt objects like clubs, hammers, etc., it's all the way down at 243. Shotguns at 152, narcotics at 111, fire at 73. But just to give some perspective of the context of what we're talking about when we're talking about the subject of gun violence and how that differs from other forms of violence.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else neutral? Okay, we'll move on to Rule 38 on your agenda. It is Rule 5, Section 5F, and it's Senator Hunt. Senator Hunt, you were up.
Thank you, Chairman Erdman. My name is Megan Hunt, MEGAN and this rule proposal would limit the speaker priority bills from 25 to 5. Rule Proposal 28 is another proposal to put a reasonable check on the authority of the speaker. I have a lot of respect for the role and the enormous responsibility it carries, but 25 speaker priority bills is a lot. And many of us know through personal experience that in recent years, at least since I've been in office, we don't typically even get a chance to debate all of the senators' priority bills. So I think that we shouldn't give so many priority bills to the speaker when the individual senators that represent their apportionment of Nebraskans are not getting a chance to have their priority bills heard. So with all due respect to the speaker, I think it's very fair that the speaker get 5 speaker priorities instead of 25, in addition to his or her personal priority, by the way. So it'd be their own personal priority and 5 speaker major proposals, including that, or assuming that my rule proposal that I introduced earlier about getting rid of the major proposals isn't adopted. That's still a lot of power for the speaker to have to advance the legislation that they view as essential to the floor, essential to get debated. And to me, it just seems unfair to allow the speaker to have 25 priorities if we can't even get to the priorities of the 49 senators. Thank you.
Okay. Gonna go from 25 to 5. Any questions? Thought maybe we'd get one. But... Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator John Kavanaugh, Speaker priority bills. Looks like you want to give him more bills. So join us. Oh, come on.
Thank you, Chairman Erdman. Thank you, members of the committee and those watching at home still and in here. So so in my process of reading the rules, kind of came across a few things that I just thought needed clarity and maybe tightening up. And this is one of those. So right now, the speaker can designate priority bills, which obviously just heard from Senator Hunt's introduction there, a certain number of those. And the speaker can designate any senators a priority with their consent. The speaker is currently allowed to withdraw that priority without the agreement of the introducer of the bill. If your bill becomes a committee priority, the committee cannot withdraw that priority designation without your consent. And so I'm just saying, let's add that language to the speaker priority designation. And the reason for that is if you were to go and seek a speaker priority and be so lucky as to get a speaker priority on your bill, you would choose not to use your own personal priority for that and therefore have relied upon that priority. And if the speaker then changes their mind after the fact, your bill would no longer have a priority without your consent, and you would have maybe already used your priority. So what I'm saying is, if in the rare, may it be situation that you get a speaker priority and the speaker changes their mind, that they shouldn't be able to eliminate your priority without you agreeing to it. That simple.
Any questions?
Not personal against you, Mr. Speaker. It's about future speakers.
So, Senator Kavanaugh, does that happen? Does a speaker, say, I'm going to make it a speaker priority and then change his mind? I don't know that I've seen that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what I would say is we're not making rules about a specific scenario. We're making rules in the cool light of night, I guess not day, about potential scenarios to ensure fairness and head off problems that we can see. And this is one that I see for all the reasons I just articulated. Someone could rely upon that and then be disadvantaged as a result of a change in circumstances. I'm not saying you probably would be in your best interest to agree to the speaker when they ask you to take away the designation, because they could just not schedule it still, or whatever the other powers of the speaker are. But what I'm saying is you still should have that conversation.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we'll open it for proponents on those two issues. Rule 5, Section 5F, speaker major proposal or speaker priority bills. Anybody in support? Anybody in opposition to those two rule changes? Anybody in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, we will move on to rule on your agenda, Rule 40. That's Rule 8, Section 2B. Record all votes taken in committee. And that is Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Is Senator Kavanaugh here?
I suspect your brother's gonna find her.
She's got both of those. Is Senator Kavanaugh out there? Okay. We'll pass over those two. Let's move to item 42. That is Rule 6, Section 3F. Senator Ibach, removing IPP motions before a bill is read. You have the floor.
Thank you and good evening. My notes said afternoon, and so I'm deferring to the evening.
Okay.
Good evening, fellow members of the Rules Committee. My name is Senator Teresa Ibach, Teresa Ibach, and I represent Legislative District Number 44. Today, I'm here to introduce a rule proposal that will strike Section F of Rule 6, Section 3, and that's also known as 42 on your ledger. I am one of 14 freshman senators and have been immersing myself in this process this week. As I've been watching bill introductions so far, I noticed quite a few instances in which senators are applying IPP motions before a bill has even been referred to a standing committee. As a member of the Rules Committee, I asked you, Chairman Erdman, to clarify this procedure, and you explained to me that this is a way to basically kill a bill before it is even discussed in the body. I've already seen the amount of time and effort it takes in crafting good legislation. We senators spend considerable time and effort working with the general public and other stakeholders to introduce legislation that is important to the people of this state and our districts. While we may not always like the legislation that's offered, I do believe we should allow a senator the ability to open on their bill and any amendments on the general file to make the bill better before these filibuster motions are offered, which is why we should consider removing Rule 6, Section 3F. This rule states that in a motion to indefinitely postpone a bill, before the bill is read on general file, such motion shall require the affirmative vote of a majority of the elected members. After a motion is indefinitely postponed, after a motion to indefinitely postpone a bill has been offered, and the introducer of the motion has made his or her opening remarks on the motion, the principal introducer of the bill shall immediately be permitted to speak for 5 minutes on such motion. While I understand the need and the usefulness of the IPP motion, this rule change does not get rid of the ability of an individual senator to offer the IPP motion. By striking this language, the IPP motion, which has been introduced before the bill has been read across the general file, loses its priority. This change will allow the introducer of the bill the ability to introduce his or her bill and allow for amendments to be offered. After the introduction of the committee amendment, if there is an amendment, the IPP motion will be allowed to be considered by the body. I think this is a fair and collegial approach to discussing difficult legislation facing this body. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions for Senator Ibach? Thank you. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Okay. That is a rule change all by itself. It's not designated with another one. So are there supporters? Are there proponents to the striking the IPP motion before a bill is read? Are there any opponents to striking the bill, the IPP motion before a bill is read? Is there anyone in the neutral capacity? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Senator Kavanaugh, we're going to do Rule 40 on your agenda and 41 also. Okay, Rule 8, Section 2B is the first one, and that is record all votes taken in committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's Michaela Kavanaugh, Machaela Cavanaugh. And as I said on my previous, I wanted to close on my firearms bill and speak to some of the concerns that were stated previously. This bill prohibits both firearms and lethal weapons. So I think that would include hammers, bats, machetes, crossbows. I'm trying to remember all of.
Halberds and scimitars.
I'm sorry, what was it?
Halberds and scimitars.
Halberds and scimitars, and we'll throw in mace for good measure. So it does prohibit all lethal weapons, not just firearms in the legislative space. And as I also stated previously, we already do not allow signs, which some could argue is a restriction of other constitutional rights, such as free speech. So when you are in the legislative spaces, we are allowed to purport ourselves in a way that we deemed necessary and appropriate. And I do think that it is appropriate to have a restriction of firearms and lethal weapons in our spaces when we are conducting our business, because as Senator Board very importantly put, we should not be making our decisions based on a fear for our lives or the lives of our loved ones or the lives of our colleagues. And I did feel intimidated when people had loaded weapons brandished directly behind me, a whole row of them, while I was introducing legislation around domestic violence and weapons. So with that, I will move on to my recorded votes taken. So this is two different bills. Rule 8, Section 2B is about the Appropriations Committee. So since I have been here, and Senator, I apologize because I don't recall what committees you are on, but the Appropriations Committee has always operated a little bit differently than the rest of the committees. Since I've been in the legislature, when a committee puts out an amendment to a bill, we typically vote on what the bills are that go into that amendment. And then that is part of the committee statement and the report out as to what has been amended into the committee amendment. The Appropriations Committee agrees upon which bills they have heard will be a part of a packaged amendment, and then they vote on the amendment that has been put together, but they do not vote on the individual bills. And therefore, we don't actually know if individual bills, who voted for them, who supported them, who didn't. And I think that we should have the same level of transparency across committees, and all of our committees should be treated the same way in how they report themselves when it comes to reporting out legislation. So that is the intention of the Appropriations Committee bill. The Executive Board report, and I apologize, it might not be written exactly to my intention. My intention was, so when the Executive Board takes action and they record the action that they've taken, it is available to the public, but it is not put forward to the public. You have to request it. And what I am intending to do is that it's just automatically put forward to the public, whether it's put in the journal or published on our website.
Okay.
I think it misinterpreted about the committee, how special committees are selected, and I honestly didn't know that it did that. That wasn't my intention. I'm not opposed to them being recorded, but that wasn't part of what I was trying to do. I just want recorded action taken by the Executive Board to be proactively made public, not reactively.
Okay, any questions? I have one, Senator Michaela Capel, on Rule 3, Section 19. I'll just read what it says. It's on page 21. Do you have your book there?
I do.
Okay, if you go down to the bottom of the page, Section 19, under A, there are 4 items listed. And these are the things that should be included in the committee statement. Pay particular attention to number 2. A roll call vote of all final committee action on the bill shall be reported in the statement, all right? As a member of the Appropriations Committee for 4 years, I tried to get that. I tried to make that happen. It's already a rule.
Right.
I don't know that we need to make a new rule. It's a fact that we didn't follow the rule that was there.
I agree. So I guess my intention was to re-elevate that issue and, if necessary, make it stated in our rules that the Appropriations Committee should be abiding by the same rules as all of the other.
And what aggravated me more than that was on numerous occasions, I would call for a roll call vote. It was recorded. At the end of the session, I asked for a copy of all roll call votes, I could not get in.
Senator Erdman, what I'm hearing is that you and I are in agreement on my rule.
That is correct.
It's late, I know, but just for clarification.
Just for clarification, your new chairman of
Yes.
the Appropriations Committee
Yes.
will adhere to all of these rules.
I had a feeling because I have heard both you and Chairman Clements speak about this as well. And
Yes.
so I know that it is in here. I guess my intention was to make it more explicit or at the very least have the conversation publicly once more
Bring it to our attention.
that it
Thank
is,
you.
yes. So
Thank you.
I fully support that.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And I support you and I agree.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, anything else? All right, so Rule 40 and 41, are there supporters or proponents of those two rule changes? Is there anyone in opposition to that? How about neutral? Okay, all right, we're gonna move on to 43, and I'm gonna turn it over to Vice Chairperson DeBoer to handle those. She's going to handle 43, 44, 45, 46, and 47, because I'm included in several of those.
48, 49,
Yes,
basically next however many.
thank you. Go ahead.
All right. We'll start with Senator Michaela Kavanaugh to open on Rule 43.
Man, I walked away too quickly. Hi, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, MACHAELA-CAVA-NAUGH. Okay, so records shall be made and transcribed. This is about legislative briefings. Oftentimes they are on the internal TV, but we don't have them recorded or available later. This is the intention of this is to have a transcription available at some point. Not, I don't have a timeline, but just like other committee hearings, so that we can reflect back on what was said, because we don't all have photographic memories. And so just treating them like a committee hearing in that we get a transcription of the briefing. That's it.
Any questions for the introducer? Seeing none,
Great.
we'll have Senator Erdman come up.
Just looking to see if I'm back up in 10 seconds. So, all right.
Senator Erdman is going to open on Rule Proposal 44. Folks, we're getting there.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. My name is Steve Erdman, SDEVERDMAN. I represent District 47, 9 counties in the Panhandle. Rule 44 is a rule that will require an appropriations, and probably something that we can't implement this year to implement this year because of the necessary equipment and the appropriations needed. But what it is I'm saying that a video record of all debates, hearings shall be made available on the legislative website within a week of the date of the debate or the hearing. My intention is in the future to have all of these hearings and the debate on the floor, a record kept by video. And so that's the proposal of Rule 44. Very simple, straightforward. I am sure the clerk will have an opinion on that, but I know it's going to be costly and it takes some time to set that up. Any questions?
Any questions? Start with Senator Hansen.
Thank you. So we would keep these indefinitely, like with the
I
video?
would assume that it'd be.
All of them? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I don't know if after a certain amount of time, get rid of them or not.
All the transcript are kept that way.
Any other questions? I have a question.
Go for it.
Senator Erdman, would this be considered then the official transcript, or we would still have the official?
We still have the official.
So this is like an unofficial, and we would call it the unofficial.
Right.
And would you be opposed to having a start date affixed to this? Because if we put it in our rules now and it says 2 weeks,
Not
then
at
we
all.
would have to, so we'd have to put a start date and say
No,
after this.
2
date.
years from now, whenever it is.
Those are my questions for you, Senator Erdman. Any other
Okay.
questions for this introducer? No questions. Let's have proponent testimony.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Arlo Huddle, ARLO HETTLE. I'm the Grassroots Advocacy Coordinator at the Nebraska Civic Engagement Table. I'll skip through the mission. We've heard that already today. But I just want to emphasize that our organization works with 501c3 nonprofits across the state to increase civic participation, and that the inaccessibility and lack of transparency in government can be one of the biggest barriers to citizens feeling informed and engaged in the decisions that affect their lives. And the more that you all as the legislature can do to make it possible for citizens to stay up to date with what's happening here in Lincoln, the better. So this rule change, creating a video record, would allow for a greater number of people to view legislative hearings and better understand the policy decisions being made. A video record is a more engaging way to follow what's happening in the legislature than a written record for a lot of folks. And we would look forward to using it to increase public awareness of hearings and debate among our members. So thank you.
Any questions for this testifier? I don't see any, thank you. Next testifier in the proponent position.
Senator Gore, members of the committee. Again, my name is Gavin Geis, Gavingeis. I'm the Executive Director for Common Cause Nebraska, testifying in support of Rule 44. I will not go into great detail, but I did do a review of state legislative websites ahead of this hearing to look at what other states are doing. Roughly over half of states have some system for keeping video archives. They vary wildly in quality. There are some who just use YouTube. There are some who use proprietary systems that could be inaccessible for the public. My recommendation here is we are fully in support of having these archives available, but that in the process of doing this, Nebraska takes a really hard look at what other states are doing and make sure that the system is actually accessible for Nebraskans, that it isn't hidden behind proprietary systems that don't make a lot of sense, that are very in the weeds. Overall, this is a trend across the nation. States are doing this. It's something Nebraska should do, especially since we're already recording these productions. But we need to make sure that whatever system we put in place is accessible and is easy to utilize by Nebraskans. Otherwise, this is a great change.
Senator Arch, any questions, Senator Arch?
Thank you. When you looked at the other states, do they store them indefinitely? Or is there?
It's a wide range.
Okay.
There are some who go back a decade, and there are others that maybe go back to a session or two.
Okay.
So we could really make up our minds on how long to keep it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next proponent testifier.
Hello, my name is Angie Phillips, ANGIEPHILIPS. I'm here on behalf of the Nebraska Legislative Study Group. So one of our missions is to help ensure that the second house can participate. We believe that they have a right and responsibility to do this. One of the easiest ways for most people to be able to participate is to just watch you guys, watch you do the work. So one of the things that our group has actually taken some action on this, what we do is we stream the NPM stream onto our social media and YouTube accounts so that a recording is created. So Nebraska Public Media streams the legislature, but there's no recording created. So we take their stream it onto our social medias so that our membership and the public, because we have public, stuff, can go back and then view and watch the legislature later on. We actually would prefer that this be legislated. Senator Brewer introduced something this year, and he had introduced something last session. We would prefer that. But we would definitely support a rule change that does this while we're trying to get that legislation passed. I'm happy to answer any questions as far as how many people are interested, how many viewings we had this first week. We had about 1,500 viewings of the legislature. People definitely want to be able to come back and see what's happening for themselves. If this is something that, to be honest with you, a couple of housewives could figure out, then it's something that the Nebraska legislature should be able to figure out.
Do we have any questions for this testifier? Senator Ibach.
How do you determine which hearings or programs that you stream?
Which year?
How do you, yeah.
So currently, we work on streaming every single one that we can. So whatever Nebraska Public Media streams, we then work to stream. We have a really great volunteer group. One of our co-founders, Cindy Maxwell Osdick, she has kind of taken the lead on this. She's unable to be here tonight because of family emergency, so I'm here instead. But yeah, so we work on streaming everything. We stream the public hearings, we stream the floor sessions. When you go into the public hearings and you have more than one committee hearing happening at the same time, we stream one of them and then record the rest and then stream the recording of the rest of them so that that recording is created. Like I said, we have much more limited resources than the legislature would have. So,
and this might be a dumb question, but are there any licensing rules or regulations?
We are not an official organization. We haven't run into any problems when we have checked and spoken with Nebraska Public Media about the copyrights and stuff. We are using it within means, it's the Nebraska Public Media, all of their logoing and everything is on there. We're not like claiming the stream or anything. On top of that, it's used for educational purposes. We use it for educational purposes, so.
Thank you, Senator Ibach. Other questions for this testifier? I have a question. You mentioned, or maybe I heard it wrong, did you say you like Senator Brewer's bill better than this rule proposal?
We like that idea of being able to work on permanent legislation that would provide video recording. We are concerned if it became a rule, then it would more easily be changed later on, or our other co-founder, Cindy Maxwell Osdick, had worked with Senator Brower a little bit. So, just to work things out, make sure that when it gets done right in the sense that it is accessible to everyday public in the sense that, not just accessible, but easy. Like if you go and find 800 sessions of the legislature, that's not really helpful unless you can also, search or use key terms, different things like that. So we would prefer legislation that could be worked on to make sure it's done correctly, but we would support a rule change in the meantime.
So there's nothing about the content of the rule change that you object to and favor the other. It's just that you'd
The
rather have
permanency.
legislation rather than a
Correct.
rule. All right, that's helpful. Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Can I just make one comment? I think the challenge would be that if this was a rule change, without an appropriation bill, this will cost. And so, those will be some of the discussions that we'll have.
Yeah, and that's definitely a discussion I would let you guys have. I know that right now, and I say this with so much respect, I don't mean it disrespectfully, but right now I feel like a lot of what my group does is the work of the legislature. So if you guys wanted to start funding that and doing it, it would be great.
Thank you, Senator Arch. Any other questions? Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Next proponent testifier.
Hello. Edison McDonald, EDISON, MCDO, ALD. I'm the executive director for the ARC of Nebraska. We advocate for people with disabilities. We're in support of both of these. I think what we frequently deal with is that our members are people with disabilities and their families who are tremendously overstretched, on average exceeding 26 extra hours of work per week, just between PT, OT, speech, all the extra things that come with having a kid with a disability. So our members, more than your average parent, are exhausted. They get to the end of the day, 9:30 p.m., and then maybe they've got about 30 minutes where they're like, okay, I can kind of pay attention to something. And so then we've really shifted our training models to really focus more on those recorded videos. When we send out live things, if I can get 70 people, I'm pretty happy. But if we send out recordings of videos, we get hundreds of people who engage. And I think the same is true of the Nebraska legislature. And I want to thank the legislative study group and Ms. Phillips, because I know I miss a lot of hearings and I go to them to go and watch the recordings of the hearings when I can't get on. And it's tremendously beneficial, whether you're a lobbyist trying to track a couple different committee hearings or you're a busy parent. So I'd urge y'all to support this. Thank you.
Question?
Any questions? I will say that I have actually watched them as well when I had to miss one of my own committees because I was testifying on a bill in another committee. So, thank you. Next proponent testifier. Is there an opponent? Anyone in the neutral capacity? What? Shocking. Welcome, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Senator. For the record, my name is Brandon Metzler, BRANDON-METZLER, Clerk of the Nebraska Legislature. I'm not in opposition. This will be similar to the ADA remote testimony that you heard earlier. We're not in opposition to this idea. I think there's just some logistical hurdles that need to be worked through from our end. These conversations have been ongoing since at least 2017. Senator Geist had brought a bill, even before then a little bit as well. The rule change specifically we can discuss. Senator Brewer's legislative bill is probably a better vehicle for this in the sense of 1 week timeframe is very limiting for our office. We have an ADA requirement because of the fact that it's going to be streamed and broadcast, Florida Bay being broadcast, committee hearings being streamed. So we're going to have closed captioning on those. This isn't as easy as upload it to YouTube. We've got a multitude of factors in play of what videos are on the side, what ads are being run. You know, there's some limitations for government, but we really want to put the legislature in the best light. So the YouTube option, at least past executive boards have ruled that out. That leaves your closed captioning option as, you know, NPM does it on their side, or we do it later through other means. Our transcribers are working with a program right now that allows for transcriptions and closed captioning. So we would need a little bit more time to get those uploaded potentially, depending on how we work through that system. The other thing is storage costs. To Speaker Arch's point, if you want to keep these indefinitely, NPM gives us the videos in like 4K quality. We don't necessarily broadcast that, but depending on what they're going to store or what we're going to store, who does the storage, who captions it, the cost associated with both of those. And the fact is it can be manipulated. You know, that's the other reason we've shied away from video for a long time, especially now in the world of deep fakes. You know, somebody takes your video, you speaking on the floor, they manipulate the audio, they manipulate the video. You know, there's just some big considerations from a public perspective of what product are we putting out there, and are there ways to watermark it or you know, manipulate it in our favor so it's not, you know, manipulated later by bad actors.
Are there questions for the clerk? I have a question, Mr. Clerk. What kind of time frame do you think we're looking at in terms of at least kind of getting to the bottom of some of these questions about how to do it and all of that sort of thing?
Absolutely. Senator, that varies on the way that we do our closed captioning. There's discussions right now with NPM, and that you'll see that in a fiscal note to Senator Brewer's bill. I don't want to speak for them, but I think the thought is if they are the ones doing the closed captioning, the bill, you know, the fiscal note looks a little bit higher on their end. If they are producing it in the same way with committee hearings that are not closed captions because they are streamed and not broadcast, that falls to us. And I think our fiscal note looks a little bit different, and your time frame looks a little bit different because we're receiving video that is not already closed captioned in the way that it would be if NPM was handling it. So that puts it on our transcribers to run the video through their software, and then they upload it with the transcription / closed captioning. So a little bit later time frame if we're doing it versus if NPM does it.
Okay, other questions? Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Senator.
Is there any other neutral testimony? That concludes then the hearing on Rule Proposal 43 and Rule Proposal 44, and we will move to Rule Proposals 45, 46, and 47 by our own Senator Erdman.
Thank you again for staying this long. My name is Steve Erdman, E-R-D-M-A-N. I represent District 47, 9 counties in the Panhandle. What I bring to you in Rule 45 is perhaps the most common sense rule change ever introduced in this legislature.
Wow. Ever.
This rule change is supported by both of my Democratic friends and others that I've spoken with. So you have two documents, you have several documents, but I would call your attention to the one that says Rule Change 45 and the one right behind that. A couple of years ago, I had suggested that we have all odd-numbered committees. It was then mentioned that it would be difficult to do that and make it work. So in my past experience, most of the boards I served on were odd-numbered. So I thought, how difficult can it be? So I sat down one day and began to draw up what I thought was the opportunity to go to odd numbers and see if it would work. Then after I did that, I called my good friend, the actuarial in the legislature, Rob Clements. And I sent him the document and I said, mathematically, can you see if this is correct? And Senator Clements did the math and he sent me an email back and said, I've checked it in every way that I know how. And it is functional. This is the way it would work this way. So I bring your attention to several things that I think would draw some discussion. And those are which committees are 9 and which committees are 7. Okay. So what I did, and if you'll see, if you look at the second sheet where it has the current and the new side by side, the Ag Committee is currently 8. I took it to 7. The Appropriations Committee was 9. I left it at 9. The Banking Committee was 8. I reduced that to 7. Business and Labor was 7. I left it at 7. Education was 8. I made it 9. General Affairs was 8. I made it 7. Government was 8. I made that one 9. Health is already 7. It remained the same. Judiciary went from 8 to 9. Natural Resources went from 8 to 7. Revenue went from 8 to 9. Transportation went from 8 to 7. And Urban Affairs is currently 7, and I left it at 7. So you'll notice at the bottom, each one of those days has 48 senator days. So it is exactly what we need to do to go to odd-numbered committees. Now, as you know, this won't go into effect until 2025 because we've already selected our committees for this biennium. So one of the things that I needed to change at the bottom, I see I didn't get that changed on the Rules Committee. I need to change that to 7 and it says a 5. So I need to make an amendment there. But that is my intention and I think it works. I think those that have an opportunity to review it and look at it, we may have a discussion about which committee needs to be 9 or 7. I thought 9 was appropriate for those committees that I chose because they generally have more bills or maybe a more influential committee. So that was my intention. So that's what I have, and I would try to answer your questions.
First, Mr. Chair, I would like to apologize for my flip comment. You may not have heard it. Sorry about that. I was just joking.
No need to apologize.
Are there questions for Senator Erdman? Senator Erdman, would we specifically write in here to begin in January of 2025 so that it wasn't, so we weren't in contravention of our own rules by not having the right number of people in the right committees?
Well, I don't know that would be necessary. We've already set up our committees and the numbers are already there. We could put it in there that it begins in 25. It'd be fine with me. But I didn't intend for it to start now.
Okay.
Okay, that wasn't my intention.
Other questions? All right. You now have rule suggestion 46.
Okay. Rule 46, and I'm not sure exactly how that is presented as it is. I spoke with the clerk and we will make an amendment. You would think that the person who is setting up the rules committee would have his bills earlier than 46, 47, 48. Perhaps not. Anyway, what I'd like to do, and if you've not seen, if you've never went to the clerk's office and got Appendix A, Appendix A is the rules, the description of the rules, how committees should be set up. That document is 10 pages. and it describes how you should run your committees and those things. I have in the past gone to the clerk's office and gotten a copy of Appendix A and read through that. In the rule book, you'll notice under that section that it has a statement there between two of those sections, and it says, the model committee rules, Appendix A, is on file at the clerk's office. And then what you do is you go there and you get a copy of what I asked the clerk, which would he prefer to have the rules printed, Appendix A printed in the rules? Or would he rather have a link that you can click on and get it from the clerk's office? And his answer to me, he'd rather have a link. So I would like to put in an amendment when I get a chance to do that, that will say we will have a link to the website where you can find Appendix A. Because it would add another 10 pages to our rule book. I don't think that's necessary, but I think it should be available to someone who wants to see it. If you're not in the Capitol and go to the clerk's office to get it, I think it should be available. So that's the intent of Rule 46.
Very good. Any questions about this one? Moving right along then to Senator Conrad and rules proposal number 47.
Hello, good evening. My name is Danielle Conrad. It's Danielle, Conrad, C-O-N-R-A-D. I'm here today on behalf of North Lincoln Spuyten 46 Legislative District. And I think this is my final proposal for the evening. So appreciate your service and ongoing consideration and attention and that of the many stakeholders that are here today at this late hour as well, because they're so invested in ensuring fairness in our fine institution. So really, this is a rather straightforward measure. And I noticed in some of my earlier commentary, if you look at our existing temporary rules, and if you look at Rule 3 in section sub F, essentially that dictates the parameters for the Rules Committee. It's 2 sentences. It's a 2-sentence rule. Brevity isn't always a bad thing, but perhaps by providing a little bit more clarity in terms of how the Rules Committee operates, we can help to provide a little bit more opportunity for people to read the proposals, for people to engage with the proposals. I know that my office fielded a lot of questions from constituents and from stakeholders, as I'm sure yours may have as well, and of course the chairman's office, with people who are just, we want to participate, where can we get the rules? We want to come to the public hearing, when is it? And then the public hearing kind of shifted and changed, and I appreciate that it did, and I'm grateful to have the extra time, so I thank Senator Erdman for that. But I do think that it would be beneficial if we just had a bit more clarity and a bit more uniformity, much more in a much more similar manner to the amount of time perhaps that we have available when we can digest and review legislative bills or legislative resolutions before public hearing. So perhaps not the full 7 days as we see in those other kind of analogous situations, but I do think it would be important if we did set at least a little bit more clarity and uniformity of how and when we're going to set the rules hearings, because I think that could be beneficial to the public and the body. So that's the impetus for the rule change.
All right, do we have questions for the introducer of this proposal?
All right.
Thank
and
you,
with
Senator
that, good
Conrad.
night. Thank you.
We will now take proponent testimony for rules proposals 45, 46, and 47.
Good evening, members. Thank you for your patience this evening. My name is Nathan Leach. That's Nathan-Leach. I'm speaking in support of proposed rules change 47 offered by Senator Conrad and speak on behalf of Nonpartisan Nebraska. This proposed change to the legislative rules would require the Rules Committee to provide at least 3 calendar days notice prior to conducting a public hearing. The proposed change also increased both the time span in which the hearing must be scheduled and conducted by 3 days to accommodate the 3-day notice requirement. Currently, Rule 3, Section 14 of the rules provides that before taking final action on a bill, resolution, or gubernatorial appointment, a committee shall hold a public hearing thereon and shall give at least 7 calendar days notice. Proposed changes to the legislative rules currently have no such requirement for notice, and in the past, this has resulted in the Rules Committee conducting hearings on proposals after giving the public less than 24 hours advance notice. Rules impact every aspect of the legislative process and can have far-reaching consequences. If lawmakers are going to provide a public hearing, we believe it is only fair that the people of Nebraska have enough time to make arrangements for travel, to review and study proposed changes, to give the press enough notice to report on proposed changes, and to provide lawmakers with an opportunity to review changes prior to the public hearing. Since 2017, I have asked lawmakers to reform our rulemaking process so that it can better serve the legislature. In each instance, this request has been kicked down the road for future lawmakers. This notice requirement is one simple way to ensure that as we consider changes to this important legislative institution, we are doing so after having considered those changes thoughtfully and with the input of all those who may have reason to provide insight. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Leach?
Thank you.
I don't see any. Next proponent testifier.
Hi there. My name is Arlo Hettle, ARLOHETTLE. You happen to get me in back-to-back ones. I'm here to testify in support of what was Rule Change 50, which would amend Rule 3, Section 4F. With the Nebraska Civic Engagement Table, working with nonprofit members across the state to increase civic participation and build a more engaged Nebraska. And as we've said, we know that the rules by which the legislature functions make a huge difference in how many voices are able to be heard. By requiring public notice of proposed rule changes in advance of the hearing, we're ensuring that our communities have time to understand what these changes mean and can reach out and advocate for the legislature they want to see. It's really fortunate that what almost happened this week, which would have been a hearing on these 55 proposed rules changes with no opportunity for the public to see the full text of these modifications, was avoided. We got a great turnout here today, I think, because of the moved hearing date and because of the additional time that the public had to sit with these proposed changes. The best way to ensure that a situation like this never happens again is to amend these current rules to require at least 3 days of public notice. Many of the proposed rules we've discussed today would dramatically change the nature of the legislature, and citizens and advocates deserve to have the full information on these rule changes before we make our voices heard. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for this testifier? I don't see any today, but thanks for coming down. Next proponent testifier.
Okay. My name is Angie Phillips, ANGIEPHILIPS, and I am here to testify in support of number 47. Yeah, number 47, proposed by Senator Conrad. I just kind of wanted to walk you through like a little bit of what my group has been doing over the past couple of days since we heard about this hearing to try to get the information out to the second house in a way that they understand and know how to participate. So initially, of course, we hear about the date and then that date changes, right? So we update everything, but we're getting it out. We're saying, hey, there's a rule date coming up. We're trying to explain to them the difference between a rules hearing and a legislative public hearing. We're trying to also be in contact, which I do have to shout out to Senator DeBoer and Senator Erdman's offices. They were so helpful in trying to help us figure the process out. But, you know, we needed understanding of how the rules were going to go, like which order it was going to follow, just lots and lots of questions about this. And to try and put even just all of that into a format and then push it out through limited means. Grassroots is usually things like word of mouth, social media, maybe some emailing campaigns. That takes a lot of time. So we would absolutely be willing to continue to help push this information out to the public. But if we could get, I even would say 3 days is pretty short. We would prefer like at least a 5-day notice.
All right, thank you. Any questions for this testifier? I don't see any.
Thanks.
Next proponent testifier.
Good evening, Senators. My name is Timothy C. Melcher, Timothy. C is in Clifford, M is in Mike, ELCHER. I'm here today for Nebraskans Unafraid. So I don't need to reiterate what the previous two testifiers have just said. I am in a proponent capacity here testifying today. But the rules and procedures of legislature are very important. It's very important to understand what they are and to be able to have a say in how they are executed throughout legislature and the rest of the session. So an example of how I was personally affected by these procedures was back in 2017. There were two bills that were introduced to terminate my parental rights, and they were 106 in 2017 and 188 in 2017. Senator Brosh realized that 106 was substantially similar to 188, so she withdrew that bill. And then 188 went through the entire process through that session until the very end. And I'm not sure what happened, but I did read through the floor transcripts, and there was a motion to suspend the rules, specifically Rule 6, Section 3 and 5, and Rule 7, Section 3 and 7. And that bill was indefinitely postponed, and so I assumed that it was all a done deal and nothing to worry about. But LB 289 was already approved by the governor on May 22nd, and then language from LB 188 was amended into LB 289 the day after it was approved by the governor. So what I understand is that was basically a Christmas tree bill, because there were two other bills that were amended into that 289. But at that point, I didn't know anything about the legislature really. And so the ramifications of that 289 are still prevalent today. And so I wanted to point that out when we were having this meeting today.
All right, are there any questions for this testifier? I don't see any. Next proponent testifier. Welcome back.
Yes. Steve Jessen, StevenJessen. I'm in support of 45 and 46. And I'm not sure whether I'm in support of the other one or not, for sure. But I guess the point I'm here up to bring up here is I have been just getting into the legislature. I agree with the appendix to that being a click link, so that, you know, as we're trying to figure out as the public, we don't have access to the Capitol unless we come here. So that makes sense. And the rule committees being 5 people or odd number of people, that makes sense. It seems like everything we've been talking about today, with all the bills, all of the different things that are coming across, limiting all that. I mean, this seems like a very much no-brainer, for a lack of a better word, to limit those or make it so that those committees can either get it in or out, one way or the other. I mean, if we're going to do all these bills, we need to get them moved through the committees. Otherwise, it shortens the process.
Do we have any questions for this testifier? I don't see any. Thank you so much. Next proponent testifier.
All right, Calvin Pemberton, CalvinPemberton. I'm actually in support of all 3 of these. Obviously, we want to move things along through the committees. To have an odd number just seems like that makes sense. I don't know. I don't want to be rude, but I don't know what took so long, but that seems like something that should have been done quite a while ago. The public appendix, I actually was given this sheet about 3 days ago to start looking into to be ready for this hearing. And I looked on the website because I didn't know what it was and I couldn't find it. So it makes sense to make that kind of public and available, because I didn't even know what it was until now. So, and then as far as a notice of hearings for publish 3 days prior to the hearing, that is obviously something that the people would want all across the state, like give us a better chance to show up and be the second house that you guys want us to be. So I am in support of all 3 of these, and that's speaking on behalf of the Republican Party too. I mean, these are things that all people in Nebraska should be in support of. So thank you very much.
Let's see if there are any questions. Anybody have a question for this testifier? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next proponent testifier. Is there anyone here in opposition to rules 45, 46, or 47? Is there anyone here to testify in the neutral capacity?
Thank you, Senators. I'll make this brief just for clarification and for the record. My name is Brandon Metzler, BRANDON, METZLER, Clerk of the Legislature. There's some confusion about the model committee rules. Basically, in the mid-'80s, Senator Beitler brought the model committee rules. It was going to be a rule change to basically structure the committee so that all committees had to operate under the same parameters. There was no consensus on those rules. If you look at them, as Senator Erdman pointed out, they're 10 pages long. There's a lot of potentially divisive issues. Committee chairs like the ability and the flexibility to run the committee as they saw fit. So those never got adopted. They were published, we held on to them just as the ability for, if a committee wanted to so choose by a majority vote, adopt those as the operating procedures of their committee, they could. But we kept them on file if somebody wanted to see them. They're not secret. They're not rules that are hidden that people don't have access to. They're simply there if a committee wanted to adopt them. We have no problems at all with Senator Erdman's proposal of linking them on the digital rule book and including that in the physical rule book, letting people know they can go find those. So,
Any questions for the clerk? Speaker Hart.
Thank you. And they are what they're described as. They're model,
correct.
right? So it's not a rule like you must adhere to these. They're not rules in that respect. It's model, it's guidance. It's a resource for committee chairs. Right?
Correct. It's, for example, a committee shouldn't start until you got a quorum or full participation. If a member leaves, don't let them, make sure they come back before you take a vote. It's basic procedures of a committee that they should be structured around.
Just so people are aware, yesterday we had committee chair training for standing committee chairmen, and we handed out that model, but described it as a model. This is something that could help you in the running of the committee.
Yeah, and if I could, Senator, they have been adopted in part in the past, so committees have taken pieces of them and adopted them. So, there's nothing that says a committee couldn't run and operate on just the pieces that they liked of the model committee rules, or again, not at all.
Other questions? Senator Bostar.
Thank you, Senator Board. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Is there any concern that if we were to do something like this, where we put it into our rules in some way, that we're indicating or signaling that it is an adopted rule?
I think the way that, Senator, if I could, I think the way that it's labeled or it's categorized now in the rules is that you see the model committee rules. There's no reference that they're part of the rules. I think to Senator Erdman's point, and I would shy away from actually physically printing them in the book. I think that starts to get you down the path of people see it within the hard copy, they start to think. But right now, I'm certainly open to amendment if you want to say, these are not part of the committee, the official rules of the legislature, but they are on file and available here. Some sort of, denotation that these, are not to be followed as part of the committee rules.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the clerk? Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Thanks, Senator.
Do we have any other neutral testimony? That will conclude our hearings then on rule proposal changes 45, 46, and 47. And now we'll move to proposal number 48. And Senator Erdman, you're welcome to open at any time.
Thank you, Senator Board. For the record, Steve Erdman is my name, STEVERDMAN. I represent District 47. Rule 47, or 48, excuse me, strikes section 7D under Rule 7. And what it says, I'll read what it says, this part we're striking. For a bill on general file, no motion to reconsider shall be in order until the bill has failed to advance 3 times. For a bill on select file, no motion to reconsider shall be in order until the bill has failed to advance 2 times. For a bill passed on final reading, no motion to reconsider shall be in order except by the introducer of the bill for technical or clarifying amendments. And then the new language I added would be, at any stage of debate, a motion to reconsider may be made. The reason that I'm striking this rule, this section, is because I've never seen a bill that we vote on general file 3 times. I've never seen a bill we vote on select file 2 times. And so if we don't do that, why do we have it in our rules? And so my intention is to remove that because it's something we don't do, and it would clean up our rules and we could move forward with what we actually do would be in the rules. So that's my presentation, pretty straightforward. And if you have any questions, I will attempt to answer.
Are there any questions? Senator Erdman, I do have a question. If we strike the part that says that you can't have a motion to reconsider on a bill that's passed on final reading, I think that takes away the finality of the final reading passage. So if you could do a motion to reconsider on a bill that is past final reading, that would theoretically say that you could pass a bill on final reading and then later file a motion to reconsider a bill that was passed on final reading. And that seems problematic to me.
Do you think that's what that says?
I do.
At any stage of debate, a motion shall be to reconsider.
Well,
To
it
reconsider
says-
shall be made.
Since it says for a bill passed on final reading, no motion shall be to reconsider shall be in order. Yeah,
Okay,
so I want to clarify that.
we can have a discussion about that.
Yeah. Other questions, Senator Bostar?
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. Thank you, Senator Erdman. Related to that, it does seem though that there is a way for, in the existing rules, a motion to reconsider is allowable, right, by the introducer for technical or clarifying amendments. I don't really know how that works, to your point, if something is passed, but we already apparently have a mechanism for doing so. How do you anticipate, because to your point, Senator, we don't ever meet these criteria?
Correct.
How do you anticipate these motions to reconsider being utilized and being useful to our work?
Well, it'd be very similar to what we do when we put amendments up there, we do a vote to reconsider. So the last couple of days, we moved to reconsider the vote on committee for committee's report. And I believe that it would be similar to that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Other questions from the committee? I don't see any.
Okay.
Let's see if there's any proponent testimony, shall we?
Okay.
Are there proponents? Opponents? Is there anyone in the neutral capacity?
So, Senator, I certainly can help a little bit with clarification. Brandon Metzler, BRANDON, METZLER, clerk of the Nebraska Legislature. Senator, I think your point is well taken. When something leaves our desk, your desk up front, it's handed over to the governor. There has always been the understanding from the clerk's office, from a procedural standpoint, that when we pass something, we don't reconsider it because it's no longer in front of the body. That I think you run into a problem there with the governor as to whether or not something's delivered. Do we take it back? We've had problems with gubernatorial appointments in the same way, where we can reconsider those, but we've already handed them off to the governor as approved. Where do we draw the line as to when something becomes a different branches? The other thing I want to raise with you, if I could, senators, in consideration of this reconsider. So let's say Monday you've got a bill up and you're going to reconsider it, and you're going to vote on passage of it, and you've got 23 votes, right, for general file. The bill fails. An opponent of the bill brings a reconsideration motion and immediately exhausts your one reconsider motion, knowing full well that you don't have the necessary members there. Let's say they're out of town, they're unavailable. You've just exhausted that one reconsideration motion and killed the bill. Whereas in theory, under the way our rules are structured now, you do have the ability, although the speaker's prerogative as to whether or not he brings a bill back, but you run into that situation where if I'm an opponent of the bill, I kill the bill on general file by just offering the reconsideration motion immediately, knowing full well that you don't have the votes for it. That's consideration.
So theoretically, we would have the ability to reconsider a bill that failed for everybody from Western Nebraska. It was in a snowstorm and couldn't get there. And then we defeat the bill, whatever, do it 3 times, poof. This way, at least, if they would come back, the next Monday, they would have the ability to reconsider the bill.
Right, and I'm not saying I'm not poking a hole in the entire rule itself, just the one consideration of a single reconsideration being in order is problematic in that sense of if it's exhausted, knowing full well you don't have the votes here, could be a potential tactic of an opponent for the bill.
Is there a clarification elsewhere about when a matter is before us or at a stage of debate and when it is no longer with us and with the governor? Is that anywhere in our rules?
We don't have anything that clarifies that, no, Senator. That's just been practiced with the governor of concerning gubernatorial appointments, especially. We have been allowed to reconsider those, but there's an AG opinion that says we can on file. But it's just been an understanding of the governor that when we pass something on final reading, there's usually a representative from the governor's office in the clerk's office ready to have those handed over. So, and a reconsideration motion is in order, for a long extended period of time after that final reading vote's taken. So you're potentially handing stuff off to the governor, still having the ability to reconsider days later.
Senator Boastar.
Thank you, Senator Boer. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Within the rules as they exist, right, there is an ability to do this. Are you aware of an instance where post passage on final reading, a motion to reconsider by the introducer for technical or clarifying amendments has been made?
I'm not aware. I can certainly look back and see if we have one, but it's my understanding that I don't know that I've ever seen, and from my recollection, had that situation where we've actually reconsidered something. But there could very well be a reason it's written like that in the rules that, it was a one-off case. So
thank you.
Any other questions for the clerk? Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
thank you.
Anyone else in the neutral capacity? That will end our hearing on Rule Proposal 48, and we now will go to Rule Proposal 49. Senator Erdman, you're welcome to open.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator Boer. For the record, Steve Erdman, Steverdman is my name. I represent District 47, 9 counties in the Panhandle. The next rule, 49, is an amendment to Rule 3, Section 16A. And my friends in the media are very interested in this one. I have in the past introduced this rule change several times. And when I was newly elected, and I went to the first executive session, and the media was there, I said to the senator next to me, "What are they doing here?" And he said, "It's permitted." I said, "Oh, every board I've ever served on, every board, executive session meant executive session. Necessary staff was there to keep records or whatever, answer questions. Everyone else was dismissed." It is the most peculiar thing that I've dealt with as a state senator, that the media would have authority to be an executive session. Not elected people, all right? The media. So the introducer of the bill, who's an elected official, is not allowed in the meeting. The public that may have come and testified pro or con is not allowed in the meeting, but the media is. Now think about that. That is peculiar. So one time I had suggested it's no one or it's everyone. They didn't like that one either. So what happens if we would change it to everyone is there may be 40 people in the room and the media wouldn't have an advantage to sit in and listen to the conversation, and everyone else would understand what the media is about to spin or tell you. There have been times that the media has quoted people, senators, that they weren't supposed to, and they did it. What are the repercussions? Nothing. It is time for us to have an executive session and be able to discuss things openly in that session, because that's what it is, executive session. And so the media will come here and tell you that it's necessary that they be in there so that the public knows what happened. We have a committee statement. Every committee that votes, and the Appropriations Committee is going to be one of those going forward, will be recorded. And everybody that reads a committee statement will know how people voted. There's nothing hidden from what happens. But the discussion needs to be in private. And the only way to do that is to keep the media out. So that is the intention of executive session, open to the committee members and the staff necessary to run the executive session. I introduced that before, and I will continue to do that until it passes. There have been new senators that have arrived in January here, and they've called me, and they said, this is peculiar. This is peculiar. I said, you're not the first one to think of that. And so they come from the private sector where executive session means just that. So if we're going to continue to allow the media in there, we have to find a different word to describe what we do. Because the definition of executive session does not allow for anyone to be in the room but of what I described. So we have to make a decision. Is it executive session or is it something else? And so that's my opinion. That's my decision. That's why I did what I did. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Are there questions for this introducer? Senator Hansen?
Do you know what other states do?
I do not.
I'm just kind of curious.
I know other states don't have a unicamera.
That's true.
That's what I do know.
That's right.
My impression is they probably don't. They probably don't let them in there because those meetings probably aren't open to the public because they don't have a hearing for every bill like we do. That's just a thought.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Other questions for the introducer? Thank you, Senator Erdman.
This would be one of those when I'd like to do a closing, but I won't.
Noted for the record. First proponent testifier. Do we have any proponents? Any opponent testimony?
Good evening, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. I am Roseanne Shannon, ROSE, capital ANN, SHANNON. I'm the president of Media of Nebraska, which represents the state's newspapers, broadcast media, and associated digital outlets. I come here tonight to speak in opposition to number 49, the proposed rule change that would bar media from executive sessions. This change has the potential to reduce transparency, undermine public trust in government, and impact the accuracy of reporting on legislative matters. Reporters who currently cover the Nebraska legislature on a regular basis are very concerned about the impact this rule change could have on their ability to disseminate complete and accurate information to their readers and viewers who are also your constituents. The journalists specifically cite the effect this change would have on their ability to cover the complex issues such as budget, revenue, and tax legislation. In this session, the legislature will address many other issues as well of great importance to all of Nebraskans, things like education, abortion, prisons, and public safety, to name a few. It's important for your constituents to understand the concerns and considerations lawmakers go through in offering amendments. They want to know why you decided to advance a bill to the floor or kill it in committee. I think most of us would agree that in recent years, many Americans and Nebraskans have become more distrustful of government and our institutions. This is the time for more transparency in government, not less. This rule change would be perceived as yet one more threat to open government.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this testifier? Senator Hansen.
So I understand that the transparency part, but what are you hoping to learn from the executive sessions?
Well, I think what's important from these executive sessions, and they do differ from executive sessions that are held by other deliberative bodies. Those things were covered under the Open Meetings Act. And for example, the Omaha City Council will state a reason for going into executive session, it's usually something like a contract negotiation or a personnel matter. It's not nearly as broad as the information that comes out of an executive session in the Nebraska legislature. You can call it what you want, but it really is not the same thing as the executive session that you have for other deliberative bodies. A lot of important information, background information that reporters use to develop their stories and provide context for viewers and readers occur in those sessions. And the ability to talk to the senators and get that information and to ask questions intelligently, I think is really important. And, I have covered the legislature with the executive session. I have never been made aware of any problems. We discussed it a bit informally, but because of the tight time frame, no one could really recall any major problems that have come to our attention as a result of this.
Okay. Is this information you could probably still get without being in executive session by asking questions or going to the hearings?
Well, going to the hearings, I would say probably not. I think there is background information. I think that discussions are held. Reasons why bills are advanced or killed in committee, those things occur in the executive session. And I think it's about having a deeper understanding of some very important issues. And it's particularly important when you get into areas that are very complex, because a lot of that discussion goes on in the executive session. And it helps you ask a more intelligent question, if you will. If you don't know the background, sometimes you can't ask the most intelligent of questions. So I think it deepens understanding. I just don't think I think it's something that has worked very well. And I think it's given your constituents and our viewers and readers information that they might not otherwise have had.
I think, in my personal opinion, you could reverse that. Because I know, if being in committee enough times, I feel more comfortable when the press isn't there. Then that way we can share information sometimes that some people may not be willing to share, because now they're worried about what people are going to think of them if they say something a certain way, or how somebody might misconstrue their words in the media, whether accidentally or not, right? And so sometimes there can be a much more open dialogue where we can actually share more history and communication without the press there. You're saying the same thing. Well, we can get more information and history by being there. Well, sometimes then we can't share that, or sometimes some people are afraid to share that because how it might be misconstrued. So there, I think there's kind of a give and take here too. I think, like, you're looking for something. I think we might feel a certain way too. And so I see where you're coming from, though. It makes sense.
And Senator, I understand what you're saying as well, but I think that where I look at this, there are a lot of things that are different about government, and it's the people's business. And sometimes it's messy, it's not clean. And I guess we all have to live with that. That's kind of what you sign on to as an elected official. And so I would say, I understand what you're saying, but I think that the greater good comes when there is more openness in government.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate you answering those questions.
Senator Arch.
Thank you. I know one of the, just kind of reflecting on what Senator Hansen said, one of the concerns of a senator could be the direct quote, right? Senator Arch said such and such, versus background information so that you can understand the topic. How do you balance that? I mean, obviously, and I think that would hinder any honest, open communication. Like, whoa, I mean, I need to say this, but I really don't intend for this to be on the record in the paper. I guess, is that just our risk? Is that?
To a certain extent, I think that's true. I think that these executive sessions involve a certain amount of trust that has to be developed between the senators and the media that covers them. But I think that I don't quite understand, I guess, why someone would say something that they don't want the public to know when you're in a public capacity. So that's a difficult question for me to answer.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Other questions? No other questions. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you.
Let's have the next opponent testifier.
Senator DeBoer, committee members, I'm Dave Bundy, B-U-N-D-Y. I'm the editor of the Lincoln Journal-Star, and I'm also a board member of Media of Nebraska. 2 years ago to this very day, I was testifying against this same rule change. And so Chairman Erdman and Senator DeBoer, if you don't remember me, I'm in good shape because my arguments would be just about the same about doing the public's business in public. Around 5 o'clock today, I was able to watch this from my office, and I listened as Senator Erdman was discussing ending secret ballots. And he said secret ballots weren't in the people's best interest because the public wants transparency. I thought to myself, amen, Senator Erdman. If transparency is a priority at 5 o'clock with that rule change, why isn't it a priority here and now? Who gets to decide, and how will they decide what the public deserves to know? Winston Churchill gets the credit for saying that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. It's certainly not the most efficient, precisely because it's designed to give everyone a voice. It's certainly not the most comfortable, but the friction that it creates polishes good ideas. The media has appreciated and valued the access to executive sessions to witness that polishing on key issues. The access helps us, through our work, tell the public about your hard work on the behalf of all Nebraskans. And I'd be glad to answer questions, or if you just want to send me home to bed, I'd be okay with that too.
Questions? Senator Hansen.
I like your analogy of Senator Erdman. I usually use him a lot in a lot of my analogies for all kinds of stuff. Mostly good.
This was a good one, I thought, too.
Yeah. With his comments about transparency, I'm going to try to use a different analogy as well, kind of from our perspective that we just heard today. It's a little bit more extreme, so hopefully nobody quotes me the wrong way on this. But we were talking about
Can't guarantee that.
using the ability to have firearms in the Capitol, right? There are some senators who might have a little hesitancy about saying certain things because of something else in the room, right? It's a similar analogy to kind of where we're coming from, not to that extreme, right? But sometimes it hinders our ability to say certain things because, especially when I was a freshman senator, you're like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. And all of a sudden the press walks in during executive session and you want to kind of share stuff you don't know what to say. I mean, it could be a very hot topic like abortion or gun control or something else. And you may want to share a personal story that kind of purveys your point of view that might help communicate that with the other committee members. But then you don't want to say that. I mean, maybe how you're going to be perceived, or maybe saying somebody's name or something like that. So I think from our perspective, that's kind of my perspective anyway, maybe where we're coming from, where sometimes it does hinder communication maybe a little bit. Maybe not for everybody, but I know for some it does.
Oh, I certainly understand that. And, I've been the editor here at the Journal-Star for almost 11 years. And the reporters that cover the legislature here understand the tacit agreement that we don't quote, and we don't quote directly from executive sessions. And, what I've found is most people who have a problem with me or the Journal-Star are not hesitant to call me and let me have it. And I've not ever heard a complaint about this. And if there was a problem with it, I would hope someone would bring it to my attention. I can't speak for all media outlets, but I know my folks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Other questions? Senator Bostar.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. Thank you, Mr. Bundy, for being here. Even though it's
past my bedtime, yeah.
9:30. You spoke about sort of comparing the transparency of having the media available in executive sessions with Senator Erdman's position on secret ballots. Has the Lincoln Journal-Star editorial board taken a position on secret ballots?
We have. And I'll bet you know our position. We support them.
So since the paper supports the secret ballots. I suppose I would be interested in understanding how you go about thinking about those two things together. The exec session, media presence, plus the preference for secret ballots in the legislature.
I think that I think we've acknowledged there's a peculiar nature to the unicameral legislature. And
Which I agree.
And in both of those instances, we evaluate lots and lots of opinions when we do our editorials, and we take the issues one at a time, and we try to say to ourselves, what do we think is in the best interest? There doesn't necessarily, in our minds as an editorial board, have to be a common thread that runs through absolutely everything. We'd go nuts if we tried to do that. But on the issue of secret ballots, we believe
It's a challenge for legislators.
We believe there is a greater good served in those secret ballots in terms of executive sessions. We believe there is a greater good in our stance on that. So to the extent that they're inconsistent, I plead totally guilty. To the extent that we're trying to help the public, I plead totally guilty to that too.
Thanks, sir.
Other questions? I think it's
Bedtime?
bedtime. Next proponent testifier. Opponent, sorry. Opponent. It's 9:30.
I'll try to be brief. Good evening, I'm Nancy Finken. That's NancyFinken. I'm the Chief Content Officer at Nebraska Public Media, and I also am on the board of Media of Nebraska, speaking in opposition. We realize that executive sessions are a place for frank discussions, and our intention is not to embarrass anyone by quoting some off-the-cuff conversation or expression. The value of this rule is really to facilitate accurate reporting on complicated policy in the tradition of openness that distinguishes the Nebraska legislature. As professional journalists, we know the value of context and can discern between reporting on something like a senator lying on the floor during executive session because their back hurts, and a senator making relevant remarks and having conversation during policy debate. The former, of course, would not be newsworthy. It's not censorship for us to make that decision. It's news judgment practiced by reporters who have been trained and whose practice in ethics and public policy and journalism is what we take seriously in our duty to provide meaningful, contextual, and accurate reporting on state government with the shared goal of contributing to a more informed society. So again, Nebraska News Media understands that attending executive sessions is a unique privilege and one that we don't take lightly, while exercising the judgment required to make the most of it on behalf of our audiences.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for this testifier? Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here. Next opponent testifier.
Hello again, Rachel Gibson, RACHELGIBSON with the League of Women Voters. And you can find this in your packet on page 3. We are opposed to this closing of executive sessions. Currently, these sessions are already closed to everyone except legislators, staff, and press. While we understand that there are rare occasions it may be necessary for a committee to meet away from the public, that need does not preclude the public from knowing what decisions are being made in the context around them. The press plays a vital role in bridging that gap, and on the rare occasions that it's necessary, we encourage that they continue to have that access. Happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions for this testifier? I don't see any questions, but thanks for sticking around so late.
Oh, you give me one more time.
All right. Next opponent.
Be very brief. Good evening. My name is James Woody, JamesWoody.
I am sitting in this seat because I just want to make sure that the record doesn't only reflect that it was journalists and advocacy groups that spoke in opposition. My name is Woody. I'm a general member of the public. I follow the unicameral. I oppose this rule. I feel much more comfortable knowing that there is a journalist in the room when the executive sessions, or what we call executive sessions, are occurring. And I would yield back.
Are there any other questions? Any questions for Mr. Woody? Thank you, Mr. Woody. Any other opponent testimony? Is there anyone here this evening to testify in the neutral capacity?
I wonder if our clerk would join us.
Is there anyone here to testify in the neutral capacity? Oh, there is.
Senators Brandon Metzler, BRANDON, METZLER, Clerk of the Nebraska Legislature. I didn't have anything prepared for this, but I certainly can answer any questions that you have.
Are there any questions for this testifier? Any questions? Senator Bostar.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. And thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Absolutely.
For just always being there and neutral. So we spoke previously about how we have recommendations for committee leadership. And then we have this rule, which is specifically about sort of committees. So I'm assuming that, you know, this isn't negotiable by a committee chair. Is that correct?
Correct.
So a committee chair then couldn't ask the members of the news media to leave an executive session.
Senator, there is the caveat of closing an executive session. I don't know if that's where you were headed, but they do have.
It's not really.
Okay. They do have the option of, I mean, yes, you can't unilaterally kick out the press as a committee chairman. You do have the ability to take a committee vote to close a session. I think that includes an executive session. So if there was a topic that needed discussed at some point in confidentiality, the committee could close a session with the majority vote of the committee.
And how do we define news media? You know, for our purpose of our rules.
So traditionally, I mean, news media is broad when it comes to committees. I'll tell you that. When it comes to the floor activity, we've got registered news individuals. They have to send their credential to the clerk's office. They have to send us a letter indicating that they're qualified to be on the floor. They've got, you know, their legitimate business. And then we provide permanent credentials if they're there for long extended periods, or temporary. You see them with the sticker if they're there for the day. When it comes to committees, we have generally been flexible. They don't check in with us in committees. So news media, when it comes to committees, could be as broad as an individual with a camera that's set up to record.
So to be clear, anybody who walks into an executive session with a camera gets to stay there and record it.
Could claim to be qualified under news media. Again, we don't credential them in the same way. So that's probably.
So let me ask you, here's a scenario. Someone comes into an executive session with a camera, says that they're news media.
Mm-hmm.
The committee chair decides that they don't think they are. So they ask them to leave. So there's a question about whether or not they are news media. And if it came to the point where a committee chair had to, if the individual didn't leave, and it fell on redcoats, security, whoever, to determine by our rules if this was an enforceable provision, how would we recommend security go about interpreting this rule?
I don't know that security can interpret it. I think that there's certainly room to clarify that as to who are news media, whether that's a credentialing process similar to how we do on the floor. I will tell you, our redcoats would traditionally follow the instruction of the chair, whether or not that turns into a floor fight or a discussion within the news media of a person was wrongfully removed by direction of the chair, I think is where that would probably head. But our redcoats are instructed to follow the direction of the chair as it's the chair's meeting.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Doesn't look like it. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. That will, other neutral testimony. After we strong-armed that one. That ends our hearing on Rule Proposal 49, and we will now have Rule Proposal 50. And Michaela Kavanaugh, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, you're welcome to open at your leisure.
I'll take a little stroll, do some jumping jacks to get some airflow to the brain. Good evening, members of the Rules Committee. My name is Michaela Kavanaugh, MACHAELA-CAVANAUGH. You know, my parents almost named me Nora. That's a lot shorter. Kind of regretting that now. So what is my rule number 50 is, yes, in case of emergency federal funds, this is kind of narrow to specifically a public health crisis. I would be open to making it more broad to any federal emergency funds. Say we had another flood and we got some emergency funds while we were in session and it was after day 10. This would allow us to introduce legislation to address how to utilize those funds. That's pretty much it. So if we got if after day 10, I don't know what day we're on anymore. When we're in day 20, let's say, the federal government authorized massive package of relief dollars for some public health crisis. In this specific case, we wouldn't have to suspend the rules. We could just introduce legislation to address those funds. That's pretty much it.
Are there questions for the senator?
That's
Seeing none?
good, because I'm not sure I have the mental faculties left to answer them.
Are there proponent testifiers? Anyone here to testify in opposition to this rules change?
I'm pretty sure there was a neutral.
Anyone who would like to testify in the neutral capacity? That will end our hearing on Rule Proposal 50. And we will open the hearing on Rule Proposal 51. Senator Hunt, you're welcome to open at your leisure.
Thank you.
Okay.
One moment while I find this one. Okay. Thank you, colleagues. I'm Megan Hunt. I'm EGIN-HUNT, and I have a series of rules that are coming up next that I'm introducing. The first one would provide that the clerk's office is responsible for hiring and firing of committee staff, and that would include legal counsels and committee clerks. Senators could request permission from the clerk to hire or fire a committee staff person, and the respective committee chairperson would be given consideration in hiring decisions. The intent of this is to say that the chair of whatever committee's preferences are taken into account, and that we trust the clerk's office to honor that to the extent feasible. Something that sometimes happens around here when we elect new committee chairs is that the new chair can decide that they don't think the existing committee staff is closely aligned enough with their own personal political leanings. And then they clean house, so to speak. And I think that the committee chair should certainly have a say in who their committee staff is, but what's actually happened in practice is problematic on several levels. For one, the committee staff works for the committee and the legislative body. They are not personal senator's staff like a legislative aide or an administrative aide. These positions exist to provide nonpartisan legal, counsel, and administrative support to committees. If these staff are doing their jobs properly, their own political leanings and their own personal views won't come into play at all in the work. Also, any affiliation with a past senator or
their own party affiliation shouldn't have any bearing on their ability to do their jobs and serve the senators on the committee in an unbiased manner. If there's some issue under this rule, if it were to be adopted, the committee chairperson can request the clerk's permission to fire or change that staff person. But I think this is a fair way to involve the chairperson in the process, but also provide a check and balance that the clerk's office as a neutral entity would have primary responsibility for recruiting and hiring these staff. And then there's that extra layer protecting experienced staff people who understand the work, who understand the institution and what's being asked of them as committee staff, and who have done nothing wrong from losing their jobs purely due to changing political winds. Something I think I'm going to get 80% right, but I'm still going to talk about on the record, is that the clerk's office used to hire all the committee staff and all the senator staff. And I believe it was actually Senator Ernie Chambers who changed that and said senators should be able to hire their own staff, and that's how this changed. I still certainly support senators hiring their own staff for inside their offices because the work that we do is so political, and we want to make sure that we can trust the people that we're working with. But committee staff, it's really just institutional work for the most part, and we want to make sure that the people who get those jobs are not getting the jobs as a favor, not getting jobs because they're friends of the senator or the person that got elected, or in a real worst case scenario, that they're not getting those committee administrative positions because we had an open ballot for these committee chair positions. There was party influence in who got the chairmanship, and then there proceeded to be party influence in who was hired to work on those committees. This is a worst case scenario to me, but given the rules that have been the rule proposals that have been introduced today, I can see something like that happening down the line and becoming a new norm in this body, which would be a problem. So this is sort of a safeguard against that, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for this introducer?
Thank you, colleagues.
I don't see any. Is there proponent testimony? Anyone here to testify in opposition to this rules change? Anyone here to testify in the neutral capacity?
I will make this brief, I promise. We're name dropping the rule, Senator, so I feel like the clerk's office should give some background, and I wanted to continue on what Senator Hunt said. Brandon Metzler, BRANDON, METZLER, Clerk of the Legislature. Really quick, this shouldn't take long, so I wanted to correct the record first. Senator Bostar, to your point earlier, considering reconsideration motions. In 2011, I did some cursory research. In 2011, we have Senator Flood, Speaker Flood, pulled back a bill within that 5 days that we have to present to the governor for reconsideration. It was a change. We had read the bill title incorrectly, so it has been done. It's been done all the way back to at least Senator Jerry Warner, who did the same thing. It has been ruled out of order when it was brought back and reconsidered, not for a clarifying amendment when it was substantive. To this point, I wanted to quickly say Senator Hunt was correct, but that history is very, very old in the sense of those hires by the clerk's office were college students that essentially dictated letters for senators. We had a pool of secretaries the clerk's office hired, and senators could go to a room or bring the secretary to them out on the floor because that's where their office was, and they would sit by their side and the senator could dictate letters. It has slowly evolved to, the speaker then got an individual assistant, and then from there, everybody wanted an assistant, and we evolved into the structure we see now. This is not a new concept. This has been brought up. Speaker Christensen in the early 2000s brought this up as a concept about the clerk's office hiring. Senator DeBoer, I know you've had discussions at times about the clerk's office being a neutral hiring committee staff. There's a couple concerns we have. I agree with the neutral capacity that we could provide, but not all senators want that. I think senators like the flexibility of having somebody. There's always the conflict with a committee on who does the committee staff work for? Is it the senator? Is it the committee? Is it the legislature? We've never really answered that question. And the other problem we have is attorney-client privilege. We like the idea of when a committee staff is kept on by the next member, they keep all the documents. We've got the legislative history. That next person comes in with an understanding of the legislature and where we went prior with the committee. The problem is you've also got attorney-client privilege with that legal counsel of how much of those documents can be shared with the new legal counsel if there's that attorney-client privilege with them. This is something that the previous exec board legal counsel wrestled with. Just some thoughts there.
Are there questions for this testifier? So let me ask you a question.
Yes, Senator.
So you're saying that the attorney-client privilege holds between the chair and the legal counsel? Or is it between the committee members and the legal counsel? Who's the client?
The client, my understanding of previous legal counsel to the exec board's understanding was it was always described as the chair. So the client is the chair of the legal memorandum. The attorney-client is between that individual and the chair. It's difficult because you will have relationships with all the committee members, possibly that are outside of the scope of the chair's attorney-client. So I mean, government legal counsels have always had this problem of where does your attorney-client lie?
Okay. Obviously, that would not apply to clerks, though. So committee clerks could fall outside of the concern about attorney-client privilege.
Correct.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Board. Well done. Okay, we'll move to 52. Senator Hunt is still here.
Be here as long as it takes.
Okay.
Looks like you're going to be here for just a while.
Thank you, Chairman Erdman. I'm Megan Hunt. I'm introducing the next rule proposal to require a quorum to be physically present on the floor in order to conduct business. This rule change is a proposal to require that a quorum is physically present in the chamber in order for the legislature to conduct its business. Currently, we have the requirement that a majority or 25 members be present to constitute a quorum. However, without the specification that all 25 are physically on the floor, what this means in practice is that members will often be checked in and then leave the floor to have meetings or handle personal business or take a break because they don't want to be involved in the current discussion. This means that a lot of important discussions are not heard or contributed to by some members, and that votes are taken with some absent from the floor that may otherwise tip the balance that could affect the outcome of a bill's passage. A lot of times, some of us leave the floor during a filibuster that we're not engaged in. With this rule change, we will make the quorum requirement a little more specific by saying it's not enough that 25 members come to work that day and check in and then can do whatever they want in the legislature. They have to be present in the chamber for business to proceed. This would require that we get serious about legislating even when a filibuster is happening. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? I guess I have one. Who's going to keep track? Who's going to count those?
The clerks.
The clerk?
Yeah.
So if
You're
we're
welcome.
so we're at 25.
They keep track of the quorum now, it would be the same.
Yeah. We're at 25. I walk out to go to the restroom. Does that mean they've got to find another person to replace me?
Yeah. Yeah.
I bet the clerk's going to be happy about doing that.
This might be the only rule they won't be happy about. Yeah.
I doubt it. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any proponents? Anybody that would support the rule of having 25 on the floor at all times? Anybody in opposition? Anybody in neutral? Seeing none, we shall go to Rule 53 on your schedule. That is Rule 5, Section 3K. Allows mobile devices in hearings. Senator Hunt, you're welcome to open.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. I'm Megan Hunt, MEGAN-HUNT, and this is a rule that makes a lot of sense. This proposed change strikes a section of the rules for us that is currently being broken all the time, and it is in the rules right now. Rule 2, Section 3 currently prohibits the use of any mobile device that, quote, emits an audible signal by senators. I haven't done a deep dive into why this section was passed, but if I had to guess, I would think it would be because people started carrying around cell phones and they were going off during hearings and things like that, which is understandably very distracting and nobody wants that to happen. Technology has obviously advanced and changed. You can have a cell phone in a hearing without it making noise or being a distraction in terms of sound. Furthermore, if, I look behind myself, almost everybody in the room is on their phone right now. And we use our phones, sometimes for good things, sometimes for entertainment, but often we have to use them as senators for work as well. During hearings, I use my phone to keep in touch with my staff that's all upstairs in the tower. I use it to talk to constituents and try to answer questions on social media in real time about what we're doing and what's going on. Obviously, not everybody uses technology that way, but it is already happening, obviously. So I think it's unnecessary that we have this prohibition in the rules because there's a very valid use of cell phones. And we're already doing it. So I think we should strike that from the rules. Thank you.
Senator Arch.
You are correct. I mean, who's not on the phone, right? But I mean, what about having language in here though about talking on the phone? I mean, that's one thing. And I know that was kind of communicated to us as freshmen, like, okay, if you're going to take a call, go back to the phone booths, right? I mean, you have your phone, it goes off, but you don't just stand at your desk and start talking on the phone. Do you think that needs to be said?
Well, one interesting thing is that we have wired phones at our desks, and many of us use those phones and talk on the phone. But point taken, I agree. I would support an amendment to this rule that says don't be talking on your phone in committee. But at the same time, does that need to be a rule? Because can a committee chair just say, Senator Arch, you need to get off the phone? That's more likely what would happen. But if you wanted to add that to the rule, I would support it.
You get the look.
Any other questions? Yeah, Senator Bostrom.
Thank you, Chair Erdman, and thank you, Senator Hunt. I'm trying to read the rule as it exists and determine, is it saying that you can't use a phone now, or is it saying that you can't use a phone that makes noise?
I'm reading it as, I have the same question, but how I read it is that you can't use a device that can make noise, that has the capacity to emit a noise.
Thank you.
That's how I read it.
Senator Hibbs.
These would probably include the legislative computers they gave us, wouldn't it be?
Gosh
Those
darn
are
it, I
wireless
think you're
devices
right.
that
I think we've got to revisit the whole rule book with that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? Very good.
Thank you,
Thank
Chairman.
you. Are there any proponents to using mobile devices? No? Opponents? How about a neutral? Are you all opponent? Okay, come on down. Thanks for staying until almost 10 o'clock.
Oh, this is fun. It's my first day. So if you guys can stick it out, I figured I'd hang out
Okay.
here with you. And I'm so impressed how fast you can spell your names.
Okay.
So I'm going to try the first and the last. My name is Penny Stevens, Pennystephenes. Okay.
Very good.
I oppose the mobile devices in the hearings and such. I feel like they're abused, and I feel like if you really need to be on it, can you excuse yourself and step away? I think it's very important that our senators are, here to work and being on that device. I just think it's abused. So I'm opposed to it.
Okay. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other opposition? How about neutral? There we go.
Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Brandon Metzler, BRANDON, METZLER, Clerk of the Nebraska Legislature. A little bit of historical context. The main reason for this rule was at the time of pagers, beepers. We had problems where senators had it on their person. We'd be taking a roll call vote. Everybody's really interested in all of you when we're taking votes. Those beepers would start to go off. We had the problem. We had to put the rule in place. The doctor's still giving a beeper. It emits the light, but it doesn't have any noise. I think our interpretation of the rule, Senator, has always been that it's the latter of the two that Senator Boster, I think, discussed, in that as long as your phone's on vibrate or silent, we didn't have a problem with it. I would agree that phone calls taken in the phone booth is ideal as well. The clerk's office is willing to draft an amendment that says, cell phones are allowed on the floor. And I do want to point out, this is chamber protocol, the rule itself. It's protocols within the chamber. I think the description, there might be some confusion there, but it is chamber protocol, phones in the chamber. So we draft an amendment that says, phones are allowed, just keep them on vibrate, silent, don't have them make a noise. That's all I have.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other neutral? All right, we'll move on to Rule 54 on your agenda. Rule 54 is Rule 3, Section 19A7, testimonial reporting. Senator Hunt, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Erdman. My name is Megan Hunt, MEGANHUNT, and I represent District 8. This rule change would require that all submitted position letters are recorded on committee statements. This is also an accessibility issue. Plainly, people and organizations who are not lobbyists or do not have lobbyist representation or who don't live in Lincoln, excuse me, are at a disadvantage when it comes to participating in the policymaking process. Whether or not they do live nearby, many citizens have work schedules or transportation or childcare challenges that simply don't allow them to come in here and sit and testify on the record when they really do want to. So I think if they're going to take the time to write a position letter, which many of these people already do, we ought to include that count on the committee statement. It doesn't have to include the transcript, like the actual text of the letter or anything like that, but it could be something as simple as 10 letters in support, 10 letters in opposition from the following people. As a person who is frequently engaged in floor debate, it would be really helpful to me, and I think actually to all of us, no matter what, to be able to see on a committee statement, especially for a committee that I don't serve in, what the letters were looking like. On controversial issues especially, sometimes, and I don't have a problem with this, advocacy groups will bring in a bus, trying to round up people and get them activated and come get them to talk. And sometimes the letters change the balance a little bit of what kind of feedback we're getting in terms of people's positions on a bill. So for those of us who are not on the committee where the bill was heard, we're considering it and debating it in full floor debate, it would be helpful to look at the committee statement and get a more accurate picture of where the public is standing on an issue. My staff was in Senator Crawford's office when she was the rules chair, and they held a roundtable discussion with committee staff about this. And one of the major questions was, what do they do with form emails that are copied and pasted sometimes by hundreds and hundreds of people that we get? I hear that, and I think that we're capable of finding out a solution. It could be as simple as making a distinction between unique, personally written letters rather than something that's duplicative or copy and pasted. But in any case, I don't think it would be that difficult with technology we have to just count up the letters that are positive, neutral, opposed, and put the names and the organizations on a committee statement. A lot of times I just think we lose out in getting the full picture of public support or opposition on an issue just because they submit in the form of a letter. And I know Nebraskans are watching this right now, and many of them who think that they are politically active and civically engaged with their legislature may not even realize that all of this time that they've spent contacting their senators and sending letters and quote unquote doing the right thing as engaged citizens, we never even really got the message because it wasn't on the committee statement. So that's something I think we need to correct. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Senator Boyle.
Thank you, Senator.
You're welcome.
Are you also suggesting that when we first got here, I think you recall you used to say the following people submitted testimony and the chair would read that as the closer was coming up, but if it's 498 people, this is what judiciary broke the system, probably on one of your bills, to be honest.
It was conversion therapy.
And it was like, we could sit here for 3 hours and listen to the names of all the bills or all the
letters, yeah.
So are you proposing that they be read or just
I'm
somehow
proposing
listed, or?
That's a good question. Yes. So in judiciary, for example, it's a very different situation. I'm the vice chair on urban affairs, And with Senator Wayne, who was the chair, I was often chairing that committee because he introduced so many bills. And in that committee, maybe we would get 4 or 2 or 5 position letters. And it was very easy to read the name of the person sending the letter and their position into the record verbally. So that would be a part of the permanent record. In judiciary and some other committees, I get that it's not going to be that easy. All I think we really need, we don't need it read into the record. We just need it on the committee statement, the totals, so that when I, who don't serve on Judiciary Committee, am on the floor debating something, I can look at the committee statement and say, okay, so this is common actually. 20 people came in support, 5 people came in opposition, but there's 20 letters in support and 100 letters in opposition. So like maybe what happened in testimony doesn't actually reflect how most Nebraskans feel. Maybe that doesn't change how I vote on something, but it's good information that we are missing by not including this in the committee statement.
Okay.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Hearing none, thank you. Any proponents for this rule change? Anybody in support? Anybody in opposition? How about neutral? No, no neutral. Okay. We'll move to item 55, which is Rule 7, Section 10, minimum time for full floor debate. Rule 55. Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Chairman Erdman. I'm Megan Hunt, MEGAN-HUNT, and I represent District 8. Before I continue, committee members, can I ask if there's a number 58 on your sheet that you have up there? Is there a 58th rule?
No, there's not.
There isn't? Okay. Okay, so this rule I'm introducing is to codify the cloture minimum times. This is a rule change that would codify procedural norms about minimum times for cloture. The language I submitted is what was suggested and approved by the clerk after my office discussed it with him. It specifies that full and fair debate shall not mean less than 8 hours on general file, 6 hours on select file, and not less than 2 on final reading. When I submitted a proposal to the clerk, I actually had different times in my draft, but he said that this is the one that has been brought by many senators and suggested I try this language because it's the one that had been brought to him the most consistently. If the committee wanted to shift those numbers, I am open to that discussion, but I think it's good governance for us to have a minimum amount of time for debate before cloture codified in our rules, rather than it being completely subjective or up to the discretion of each individual speaker we elect. Speaker Scheer, who was the speaker when I was elected, had different rules around cloture. Speaker Hilgers had different rules. Speaker Arch is going to make his own decision about how he wants it to be. And nothing in this rule proposal would change the speaker from modifying it. It just sets a baseline. So the measures that we debate obviously deserve really thorough discussion, and it means so much to Nebraskans to hear their senator weigh in on a debate. And we've had multiple issues in the last 4 years that I've been here where there were senators in the queue to speak who never even got a chance to speak because, we didn't have enough time for the debate. So this may be a way to remedy that and just to codify a norm once again that helps us do our business well. Thank you.
Senator Bostrom.
Thank you, Chair Erdman. Thank you, Senator Hunt. Why no less than instead of just trying to set an amount?
Because it could be more. The speaker could have the discretion to make it more than that amount.
Isn't there sort of an upper ceiling, or maybe not, that if the speaker hypothetically, and of course, Speaker Arch would never do such a thing, but could at any point, because it's not established in rules, set the threshold above whatever baseline is here?
Yes.
For a given bill that, let's say, had to pass, and they said, okay, on this one, cloture's 20 hours, and it's going until we get there, in order to try to ensure that a filibuster was impossible, or something like that. Do you imagine any risk there?
Well, first, I'll say for me, that wouldn't be impossible. But I respect the question, but I think a speaker could already do that, and it's not done.
No, I think
It's
they
a good
can too.
idea. Maybe someone should try it.
I mean, I think they could too. The second question I had was, at least for the previous 2 years, we operated with a, if cloture hadn't been achieved on general and select file, final reading wasn't just this 2-hour thing. It became, I think went to 4. Did you omit that because you felt like that wasn't good, or was that something you would consider?
I do think it's good. I would be open to an amendment to the rule to include that. Right now, the rule as it is doesn't stipulate that. And so it would basically keep the status quo as it is for the speaker's discretion to say they want it to be 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever on final reading.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just bring it up because, if we were to seriously try to create the rules around this, what sort of comprehensive approach could we have? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you.
I believe you're dismissed. Okay, your rule, it may have been,
There is a 58. It was not included on the index, but it is a printed rule 58. My apologies, it was left off. It was on the original index. She's the last. But there's one final rule 58.
oh, the red?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
You don't?
Okay,
I have 2.
all right. All right, we'll move to Rule 56 on our agenda. And that's Rule 5, Section 5, B, C, D, and E. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Are you a proponent?
Yes,
Okay,
sorry about that.
very good, I'm sorry. Sorry to shut you off.
Right.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Rachel Gibson, RACHELGIBSON, League of Women Voters. And we just want to express our support of this bill. It's, as Senator Hunt mentioned, it's codifying something that's been the tradition, kind of the standard. The biggest piece is that we would like to see some sort of rule put in place so that it allows full and fair debate and it's equitable across the gamut. So that's our
Okay.
piece.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay, you don't have to see me anymore. Have a nice night.
Okay. Sorry I missed you. Okay, would there be any opponents? Anybody in opposition? How about neutral? Okay, now we'll move to 56. Senator Kavanaugh, as I said earlier, it's Rule 5, Section 5, B, C, D, and E.
Thank you.
Majority vote needed for committee priority bills. Let's roll, Senator.
Thank you, Chairman Erdman. John Kavanaugh, JOHN, CAVA, NAUGH, represent District 9 in Midtown Omaha. So this is a proposal like all the other ones that I've proposed. We're just looking through the rules and places that needed some clarification and maybe some enshrining of practice into the rules. This is one where committees get committee priorities. We all know that. And the rule currently allows the chair to basically pick any bill that's coming out of that committee to be the committee priority. And I'm just saying in this proposal that we require that the committee actually vote to use the committee's priority on whichever bill is being the committee priority. So putting the power in the majority vote of the committee as opposed to within the chair themselves alone.
Any question? I have one. Would that be then included in the committee statement?
You mean the nature of the vote? That's a good question. I don't think this rule would specify that based off how it's written, but I think that there's no problem with that. This is a bill that would already have the vote on the bill itself. The underlying bill would be in the committee statement, but I don't think that based off of how this rule is written, that would be required in the committee statement. But that's probably an oversight in the drafting.
Thank you, Chair Erdman. Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. So with the language as it's written, each chairperson of those committees, which are authorized to hold public hearings on bills, may, with majority vote of the committee, designate as priority. So under this, am I correct in interpreting that the committee couldn't designate a priority without the chairperson? Because it empowers the chairperson with a vote of the committee.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're asking whether, as written, if, I guess, a rogue members of the committee could choose to prioritize something.
It seems
other
like
than
they
the chair, right?
can't, but I just want to get
Yeah.
your take on.
Each chairperson of the committee, which are authorized to hold public hearing, may with, my reading of it would be that the chairperson would have to
Propose something and then get a vote.
with, yes, so it still is actually investing a lot of power in the chair. They can't be overridden. They have to be a party to that vote.
Thank you.
But they still have to get the buy-in of a majority of the vote of the committee to use the committee's priority on that.
But if you had it recorded in the statement, and it came to the floor and the committee was 6-2, or in the change of the odd number of committees, 5-2, that was improving the committee priority for that, then the people would know on the floor how it was voted out.
Well, this would be a separate vote than the vote to go vote it out. So as it's written right now, the committee can vote out, say, 10 bills, and the chair would say, well, I want to use it for Bill 1, but he doesn't have a vote. The rest of the committee wants to use it for Bill 2. Then without that vote, the chair would not be able to use that. And so have to get at least the buy-in of, in that instance, at least 4 other members of the committee, or 3 other, but depending on the regular committee, yeah. 3 other members of a 7-member committee.
Thank you. Senator,
Is this a concern that you've experienced?
You guys asked that about everyone I proposed. I looked at the rules and I saw places where I thought the rules had a weakness that could be exploited. And I thought, this is an opportunity.
I've never experienced that. I mean, the committee chairman, we're always talking, so the committee chairman's, we're talking about what's happening. We're putting together a committee Christmas tree bill, and it's going to be a committee priority. Obviously, we're putting together all the ones that we've all agreed on, and but anyway. So.
Yeah. I think that in that particular instance, you could run into a situation where somebody would say, I voted for this bill and this bill, but you're getting into a Christmas tree and I don't want that. I didn't vote for that bill, and so I'm not going to say that we should use our
That
priority.
discussion certainly happens.
Right. And I think it does put a little bit more power into the committee members' hands for negotiation in that particular situation.
okay, any other questions? Thank you, sir. Any proponents for Senator Kavanaugh's rule change number 56? Any opponents? Any neutral testifiers? I see none, Senator Kavanaugh. You're welcome to open on 57, which is Rule 1, Section 16C. This is make agenda available 1 hour after adjournment.
Thank you, Chairman Erdman, John Kavanaugh, JOHN, CAVA, NAUGH, representing District 9 in Midtown Omaha. This is, I've gotten the most positive feedback on this proposal of anything I proposed.
From the staff?
From staff, from community members, from, maybe not your staff, Chairman Arch, or Speaker Arch, I'm sorry. But this basically proposal I looked at the rule and I said, well, I don't exactly know what this means. And we have had times where under previous speaker administrations, people were refreshing the website at 11:59 midnight to see what's going to be on the agenda tomorrow. And I just looked at it and looked for a way to clearly define and say the agenda should be available as soon as possible. And so I proposed an hour after adjournment. I thought that was a reasonable amount of time to say, to be for the Speaker's office to tell us what's going to be on the agenda tomorrow. So that's
Okay.
this proposal.
Any questions? No?
No questions.
Is there a statement?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any proponents? Anyone want to support Senator Archer's 1 hour rule?
Not mine.
Anybody in opposition? How about neutral? No? Okay. All right. Senator Hunt, guess what? This is the last one.
That's right.
58. Come and join us.
Thank you, Chairman Arch. I'm Megan Hunt, MEGAN, HUNT, and I represent District 8. Before I get into this rule, I spoke with the clerk about the last one I introduced about the minimum times for cloture. He clarified to me that my rule proposal would make it so after 8 hours, a cloture motion would be in order. So a speaker could say, we're going to take it to 20 hours or 30 hours or something, but after 8 hours under this rule, cloture would be in order. With that said, Rule 58, the bonus rule, is a provocative rule. It's a provocative idea that I've brought to the committee, but we have gotten to a point in our state government where the separation of powers between the executive and the legislative branches has become corrupted. So what this rule would do is it would make it so the top 10 donations from the governor to current sitting legislators would be announced at the beginning of each day. I am introducing this because I think that something direct and bold needs to be done about the blurring of the division of power that we have in our branches of government. And so this rule would put some sunlight on one of the major dynamics affecting how this body operates. We all know that there is an increasing practice of the governor giving substantial amounts of money to legislative candidates' campaigns. And as long as this is happening, it may have substantial impacts on what legislation we introduce, what we debate, and what we pass. And I think Nebraskans deserve some transparency about which of their representatives may be influenced by a sense of obligation to another branch of government. And to, an executive branch of government, a governor that actually helped them put them there in the place of power that they hold. Something that the public doesn't hear a lot about, but plays a big role in the work we do in the legislature, is that the governor has a policy research office in their own, under their own purview, in their own branch of government. And that policy research office frequently comes down to the legislature and basically gives marching orders to sitting senators. And so I think it's only fair that Nebraskans have some sunlight on this and have a better understanding of the extent that this influence could be taking. Thank you.
Any questions? I have one, Senator Hunt. So your additional new language, the last part of that I'm trying to clarify. This shall be announced in order of highest amount and name each day at the beginning of the session.
Mm-hmm.
So every day we would announce that?
Yeah, I thought it could replace the prayer. I thought that might be best. I'm kidding, guys. It's too late for jokes. But yes, the top 10 donations would be announced at the beginning of every day. And some days that may change if a new donation has been made.
So, but with the way we report donations, it doesn't change.
It's not daily, that's correct.
It's not daily.
Right.
So there'll be the same report for the whole session, could be.
It would be the same until the quarterly reports are due and everything, and then that may change, yeah.
So maybe your rule should say, when the quarter reports are available, they shall be announced, rather than every
I
day.
support making it daily, but I would entertain a conversation about an amendment to this rule proposal.
Okay. I understand. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody in support of that rule change? Any opposition? How about neutral? I don't see any neutral. Okay, we're about to wrap up the hearing. I would just like to say thank you to all of you who stuck around this long, especially to Tamara for her help with that, and Joel sticking around. If the committee stick around for a few minutes, I want to talk about the executive session tomorrow, timing of it, okay? Thank you.